I'd like to call the April Operations Committee meeting to order. Could I get someone to make a motion to approve the agenda, please? Mr. Akers and Mr. Manelli. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Can you get someone to make a motion to approve the minutes of the March 9th meeting? Mr. Arquette? And Mr. Fay. Thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. I got to admit, this looks like first time I've ever reviewed a lineup. I don't know if the first thing on the agenda is Sheriff Bigwolf, and I don't believe he's available at this point. Oh, he is available.
Just got back.
I saw him somewhere. Yeah.
Good timing, Brooks.
Okay, so we have a resolution modifying the 2020 budget for the sheriff's office for the purchase of uniforms. Can I get someone to
Move it.
Mr. Burke and Mr. Perkins? Okay, Sheriff.
So I went earlier this year and got some forfeiture money from the district attorney's office that went to my department, hoping that it would go from the equipment line. Since then, I've had some changes in what I want to purchase. And I'm just taking that monies from the DA's office funds that we got back from some cases. And I'm just going to purchase uniform items for the jail, the civil division, and my road patrol. I'm just looking for a resolution to change this into a different line.
Does anyone have any questions for the sheriff? Mr. Akers.
Sheriff, it's the same design that you have now, same clothing, just another set? Or?
It actually coats,
Okay.
light winter or light coats for lighter weather that we've had a long time ago, and they've kind of all got old and tattered and torn, and we haven't had any for quite a while. So I want to get some coats for all three of the divisions.
Thank you.
Where do I look?
Any other questions? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And the next thing would just be, Sheriff, a discussion on a jail, please.
So as of today, we have 50 inmates in our facility. No COVID positive cases for inmates or staff. Everything's going pretty smooth right now with all the checks, medical checks, and social distancing we've been put in place. The governor put in his executive order for the face masks. Our staff are already wearing them, and the inmates are, they all have supplied masks. So we're trying to come up with some other social distancing, feeding the inmates in platoons, things like that, keep the social distancing as best we can in the facility. So those are all trying to be enacted. The one thing I am working on is one of my COs a week ago or maybe 10 days ago did make some masks for our COs, but there was another sheriff's department downstate that had the inmates were actually instituted to making masks. Obviously it'd be on a voluntary basis, and I'm looking into maybe trying to get that put into our facility where the inmates will be all volunteers. We can get some materials from some donations and try to make some masks in that way. So I think if we can get that program going, that'd be a great thing for the public. So I'm trying to instill that in the next week or so.
Great.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions for the sheriff? Nope. Very good. Thanks, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Planning Department, Jason Fotenhauer. Jason, are you on? Here you are. Okay. We have a resolution authorizing a chair to appoint the planning director, Jason Fotenhauer, as certifying officer for the environmental review as required by fiscal year 2019 CDBG grant award 1106 HR 363-19. Get someone to move this? Mr.
Fay.
Akers, Mr. Fay, thank you. Jason?
Yes, thank you, Larry. This resolution is, as you mentioned, associated with a grant we recently received. The ERR, or Environmental Review Record, is just a compliance process that we go through to make sure that the grant is in accordance with any state or federal environmental laws. According to our funder, there's a new HUD requirement. These funds originate with HUD, so HUD does have a role here that says that a name has to be associated with the environmental review officer. So that's why my name, you'll see my name, as well as the title in the resolution.
Okay. Okay, any questions for Jason? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, the next one is a resolution encouraging St. Lawrence County landowners to use marginal lands when signing leases for large-scale solar arrays. Could I get someone to move that, Mr. Manelli and Mr. Akers? Jason?
Thank you. This is a resolution that came out of the county's Agricultural and Farmland Protection Board. The county has seen quite a large influx of solar arrays developed over the last 10 years or so. And the majority of them are consuming viable agricultural land, either active agricultural land or land that is identified as prime. So the concern is obviously that if we continue to have these solar arrays on that's agricultural land, it will have a negative impact on the agricultural business. So the intent was to encourage the development, not to discourage the development of the arrays, but to encourage the development of them on less productive or marginal land. We've seen 14 projects in the last 10 years consuming about 600 and a little over 600 acres of land. And this is something that we think really is important. Obviously, the solar production is important, but preserving the agricultural land is important as well. That's the impetus for the resolution.
Any comments? Mr. Akers?
Yes.
Mr. Denisha, I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor first. We're losing about 40 acres an hour here in the United States to of prime farmland to development for various purposes, either commercial, residential, or whatever, solar. And we're going to need about 100% more food than we're producing now as the population keeps growing here on Mother Earth. And we only got about maybe 15 to 20% more arable land that is actually available. So most of this increase in production will have to come through advances in technology and in agricultural advances in the husbandry of the crops and stuff. But every time that we lose an acre of land, it's a problem because you're not going to get it back. While this resolution I like the resolution, but there's no teeth in it. And I don't know what could be had. I had this conversation with the Commissioner of Agriculture, Richard Ball, because he himself is a farmer and he had actually lost land next to him also. So here in my community, here in the Madrid Chipman area, there's approximately about 100 acres within a couple miles of my house that is going to be going into solar arrays. I won't get into the politics of the governor's decree that 70% of our energy by the year 2030, which is only 10 years away, will be coming from renewable. I don't think it's feasible. And that's why I think you're seeing in our opposition, the resolution that we had about the siting, where the public's not involved in the siting of these wind or solar arrays. They don't want pushback. They don't want the resistance. And I think in the meantime, the agricultural community, we're suffering from overproduction particularly in dairy products. And so farmers are looking for a way to hang on to the farm and using this as a source of revenue. So when you take prime farmland that has already been cleared, already has access to roads and culverts and is near the power lines, the incentive for these businesses, if there's not monetary, to put it on rocks or over in some scrub brush is not there. So while I think this resolution is important, it doesn't have any teeth, but I'll certainly support it.
Thank you. Mr. Arquette.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. Kevin's educated us on this issue over the many months. And it doesn't have any teeth. What I'd like to do is offer a friendly amendment to this that would say that we're encouraging St. Lawrence County landowners to utilize the advisement of the Soil and Water Conservation District prior to the sale of land, for educational purposes, something along those lines.
Okay, would you run that by us one more time, please, Mr. Arquette?
Yes, I'd say encouraging St. Lawrence County landowners to utilize the advice of our Soil and Water Conservation District prior to the sale of lands in association with the solar.
Did you get that, Kelly?
Yes.
Would you mind reading it back to us?
Mr. Arquette, move to amend the resolution to utilize the advice of the Soil and Water Conservation District prior to sale of lands associated with solar.
Yes, very good.
Okay.
We'll need
Any
a
dis-
second. We'll need
We need
a
a
second.
second.
I will second
Okay.
that.
Okay, Mr. Akers will second that. Okay, now we need a vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment is carried. Is there any more discussion? Mr. Akers?
Thank you, Mr. Denisha. I would actually ask Jason Fultonhauer and ask him to explain the county planning department's role in approving these projects.
Sure, happy to, Mr. Akers. Out of the 14 that are identified in the resolution, the applicant does need to refer those projects to the county planning board for review. So often local municipalities will have a local law in place, or as part of their zoning law will state that solar projects are required, are permitted, but do require a special use permit. That special use permit is granted at the local level. Depending on the location of the solar array, it also is required to have review by the county planning board. So anything within 500 feet of a municipal or county highway is referable to the county planning board. So we'll see a project. Most recently, we've seen projects in the towns of DeKalb and Gouverneur come before the county planning board, where the applicant will come in, talk to the local developer, or excuse me, local municipality. They will say, yes, we will entertain the project. However, it does need county planning board review as well. So it's submitted to the county planning board. What we see in our office, the county planning office, staff to the county planning board will see the application from the developer, will review the application, make sure that it adheres to all the requirements of the local law that may be in place in the municipality. We will make comments to the effect of it is located in an agricultural district. It is located on the type of soils that the development is being proposed to be located on. And then we'll take our review, present it to the county planning board, and present our recommendations. And in the recommendation process, we will always try to encourage, not discourage the development, but encourage the developer to look for ways of modifying the development to ensure that it does not consume excessive amounts of agricultural.
Mr. Akers.
If I could follow up, Mr. Denisha. Jason, we were entertaining the wind project in the Parrishville, Hopkinton area. One of the towns had restrictions on it and the other one did not. Could you explain to the board what they were? And then also, with the new legislation that's been in the budget, are those restrictions now mute?
Yeah, I can speak to that. It's going back a few years now, Kevin, so I will give you as succinct of an assessment as I can remember. Several years ago in the towns of Hopkinton and Parrishville, there was a large Avangrid development proposed for, boy, I think it was 100 megawatts. So that's about 50 towers, I believe, in total. About a little over 2.5 megawatts per wind tower. They were proposed in each municipality. Each municipality, both Hopkinton and Parrishville, did have wind laws in place. They were different, though. Some were more more restricted. They were just the way that they were developed for the town was geographically. So each municipality had a district where the wind towers could be permitted, and both of those municipalities modified that area or that district where the wind towers could be developed as the process went on. That's the actual outcome. I believe the project was stalled or continued by the applicant before any final approval at the town level was granted. Maybe I could defer to Legislator Perkins on that. He might have a better recollection than I do on the actual action taken by the local municipalities. To answer your second question about what the new Article 23 or the new regulation that's in place now, and whether or not that will permit the development, that's simply the perception that is out there now. It does allow for the new regulation, as I understand it, and again, I would defer to Councilor Button or Mr. Perkins again if they have more accurate knowledge than I do, is that anything over 10 megawatts is allowed through this new siting process. So the developments in Parrishville and Hopkinton were over that amount, and so they would go through that process. And the full detail of how the local municipality is involved, I would defer to others that studied this more than I've had a chance to study it so far.
Okay. Thank you.
Just a reminder, if you're not speaking, would you please make sure that you're muted? Because what happens, any activity, any noise, you can actually override the speaker. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, there being none, all those in favor of the amended resolution?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Jason, okay, the next one is a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with the New York State Office of Community Renewal for the Community Development Block Grant Funds and modifying the 2020 budget for the Planning Office. Mr. Perkins and Ms. Curran, all those, okay. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Denisha. Yeah, I I will speak to this resolution. If I could, I just would like to take just a few minutes of your time to give a little bit of background on the CDBG program, which is directly associated with this most current award, which is what the resolution is speaking to. In your Google Drive folder, there I did deposit. There was some information that was put in there that speaks to the last 10 years of. Oh, great! Thank you very much, Dylan or Kelly. This is a 10-year summary of the CDBG program, and you can see it's broken down. Two different main programs there. You've got housing rehabilitation and home ownership. And this is a quick snapshot summary. Over the last 10 years, we've been able to secure about $9.4 million funding. Next couple pages have more of a detail breakdown of that information, of that data. And it's broken down by specifically by municipality. I'll speak a little bit to the housing rehab projects. We've I guess 8 housing repair grants totaling about $4,040,000, and with those funds, we've been able to repair 124 homes in 26 different towns, villages, and the city of Ogdensburg. On the lower part of the sheet there, you see 7 DHAP or direct homeownership assistance programs, and these total about $5 million. And with those awards, we've been able to help 162 families purchase their first home throughout the county, and that program is in 29 different towns, villages, and the city of Ogdensburg. Just as a way of showing the I guess the importance of the CDBG program and how this money builds on itself, helps to build the economy of the county. Here we've done some quick multiplier analysis and think that this money, this 9.3 million, really sort of will multiply into about 21 million, bringing the total impact on the local economy equal to about $30 million over the past 10 years or so. Also in your Google Drive, which I won't speak to most specifically, is a little bit more detail about the whole CDBG program going back to 1982. I won't go back that far right now, but just a little bit more information for your review. And on this sheet here that you see in front of you, you can see down in the first category, 2019 housing rehab, $440,000. That's the resolution that you have before you tonight, and it is a contract to move that project forward, and we look forward to assisting at least 10 additional individuals in preparing their homes with these funds. And thank you very much for your continued support with these programs.
Anyone have any questions for Jason?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Reagan.
I don't have a question so much as a comment. I just want to thank the county planning office. I think those numbers speak for themselves about the value of the planning staff and the planning office. The public sometimes hears the word planning and is puzzled as to what it is that the agency does. Those of us who've worked with the planning office over the years have come to recognize that this is just a fraction of the work that the planning office does to improve the quality of life for the people of St. Lawrence County. And for many of these communities where they've assisted them in targeting housing rehabilitation money, this would never happen if it weren't for the hard work of the county planning office. So I want to thank them, and on behalf of the citizens of Ogdensburg, thank you for all the work that you and your staff continue to do for all of us.
Thank you very much. It's our pleasure.
Any other comments? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And the last one is a resolution authorizing chair to sign a contract with New York State Department of Transportation for public transportation services. Mr. Manelli and Mr. Forsyth. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is funding. It's actually it originated at the federal level. It's Federal Transit Administration formula grant funding for St. Lawrence County in the amount of $718,000 that will be used to get the public transit system in the county here. It's backdated. It includes funding for the 2019 fiscal year as well as 2020 fiscal year. And happy to answer any questions about that resolution. And if it's your pleasure, after you vote on this, I can provide you a quick update of where transit is right now in the current environment that we're dealing with.
Okay, I think, yes, that will be good after we vote on the resolution. Sure. Any questions for Jason? All those in favor of the resolution?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Jason, I'll give you the floor to speak of the current status.
Certainly. Thank you very much. You may see buses on the roads and be wondering, boy, why are those buses still running? They are still running for a couple reasons. They're running primarily to take individuals, essential workers to their places of employment. They're also taking individuals to doctors' appointments, pharmacies, and also to get required provisions, groceries, that sort of thing. So there is an element of an essential service to the bus system. However, we are very conscientious of the importance of social distancing with the bus, and we have seen quite a diminishment in ridership. We're down about 86% from our pre-COVID operations in terms of rider. There was an excellent suggestion made by Dylan a few weeks ago, I guess it was just last week now, about how we could properly accommodate riders and still meet the social distancing requirements. What we're doing is we're actually running buses in tandem. So you'll see a bus at a bus stop and you probably see another bus right behind it, because if there are too many people at that bus stop that need to get on a bus, that could impact social distancing or prohibit social distancing on that one bus, then we basically split up the ridership between those two buses. So that's one way that we're ensuring the safety of the riders. Another is we are providing masks now. There has been a large request by the transit system to have general procedure masks, which we have provided to our transit coordinator now to distribute to the buses. Ridership is down quite a bit, and the majority of the people getting on the buses are following recommendations and do have face coverings before they get on the bus. That's it for an update. Happy to answer any questions if you have any on the bus as well.
Mr. Forsyth.
Can you hear me, Jason?
Yes, I can, David.
Okay, I've got two questions. How often would a second bus be utilized? I see the buses piggybacking. How often would the second bus be utilized, percentage-wise?
It's really hard to tell. We just started it this week, David, so we don't have that data yet. At least I don't. I can reach out to our transportation coordinator, Frank Doldo, to get that type of information. It's also, unfortunately, a little bit of a hit and miss. You never know when you're going to get a group at a bus stop that over the number. So we're sort of in a tough spot. If we drop that second bus off and we have a large contingent at a bus stop, we don't want to strand people for an extended period of time.
Okay. Follow up if I could, Larry?
Go ahead.
The Amish, how receptive are they to mask? I haven't heard anything about it yet, and I'm just, I know today's probably the first day, but how receptive are they?
I have heard anecdotal evidence that a number of Amish riders have gotten on the bus with masks on.
Good. Okay. Good. Perfect. I'm set. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Jason? Mr. Akers? I think you're on mute, Mr. Akers.
My apologies. So Jason, are we still using the same number of routes?
We have reduced the route number, Kevin. We are obviously, we have discontinued the routes, the college collector, or college connector routes, the three that have run on the college campuses of SUNY Canton, SUNY Potsdam, and Clarkson University. Those have been discontinued for several weeks now. We have taken some buses off of the very lightly traveled routes, and there are probably 4 or 5 routes that really see the majority of the ridership, and that's where we're concentrating the buses right now.
Thank you, Jason.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Very good. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you all.
Next up, we have Board of Elections. Tom or Jenny, are you on?
Hello, I'm on.
Jenny?
I am.
Okay, we've got, hi, Jenny. First resolution is authorizing the chair to sign contracts. Authorizing the chair to sign contracts requesting grant extensions for poll worker training, voter education, and modifying the 2020 budget for the Board of Elections. Get someone to move that resolution. Ms. Terminelli and Mr. Perkins. Jenny or Tom, I'll turn it over to you to talk to that resolution.
Yep, this is our annual poll worker training and voter education grant. We have utilized some of the funding. So we just recently were reimbursed around $7,000 that we had spent this year out of that. So it will be a little less, but we just got the money. So we're using that funding because of, training our poll workers, and hopefully we're able to do that this year.
Any questions for Jenny or Tom? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The next resolution is authorizing the chair to have a shoebox contract extension with New York State Board of Elections. Is someone to move that resolution? Ms. Curran and Mr. Arquette. Again, Jenny or Tom, which one of you would like to speak to that?
We figured that probably this will be the last year for these grants. In the governor's budget, the state elections has warned us that these funds are going to be dried up, that the governor plans on using them up or taking any unused funds back. So whatever unused funds are in here, we will have these used up quickly, because we're also being warned by the State Board of Elections that the longer the year goes on, and as the numbers get worse throughout the year, as we all know they're going to, it's very likely that the governor can pull money back. So we've talked, and we plan on using these up very quickly.
And the shoebox funds, we've actually have put in for reimbursement of all of these funds. So they are reviewing them now because we've had a few questions recently, but the shoebox funds have been fully utilized, and the last money that we're waiting on is the renovation from our office.
Does anyone have any questions for Tom or Jenny on this resolution? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And I will ask Jenny, Tom, either one of you, both of you, if you could give us an update on the primary.
Currently, as things stand, the June 23rd primary is on. Jenny and I talked about the fact that we have to figure out where our polling places will be in some cases and how we're going to staff them. We've already been told for it. As most know, we can't use any nursing homes or any senior adult living centers. So we know that United Helpers, Joseph's in Ogdensburg, and one of the sites in Messina will not be used. And that, of course, there's also the possibility, the concern that some communities may not allow us to use some of their polling places either. So my hope is that, well, that things will go well and that we'll have all the rest of our polling places to utilize and that we'll have enough inspectors to man those polling places. But as it stands right now, we've talked in global terms about the possibility of having to perhaps merge some polling places depending on what we have for available staffing.
Jenny, you have anything to add to that?
I just think that we'll hold our hats because I think that we're going to learn more about upcoming primaries as the days go on. I don't think that we can say exactly right now. I mean, we've talked about consolidation and possibly doing that, but I think that we have to kind of see where we're at in June to know what we're going to need. And I think that there may be more coming. I hope that we're able to get through it. I know that we can get through, but putting our election inspectors at risk is very scary for us. And we're going to do all we can to, make sure that they're safe on election day, along with all the voters who do choose to come out and vote.
Okay.
I've been trying to look at some ideas, and I know it's early yet, but to me, I think you folks as policymakers want to hear what the possibilities are for options that we may be pondering. And it's early, but I don't want to make these decisions at the last minute. I think we've got to come up with as many reasonable options as possible and be ready to implement them as need be. And as I mentioned, what Jenny and I talked about is the possibility of merging polling places, which on its face flies in the notion of social distancing, because if you start merging places, you're going to have more people congregating in one place. So we may be asking your help in speaking to various polling places in your communities, encouraging them to work with us, maybe with some creativity in how we make those polling places work. The ultimate goal is to make sure we can safely have our inspectors work, safely have voters come to vote, and to accomplish our combined responsibility, which is to carry out the primary election.
Does anyone have any questions for Tom or Jenny? Mr. Forsyth.
Yeah, do you feel there'll be any changes to absentee voting? Will there be like exceptions granted, you feel, or
There's
what are
already
you
been,
thinking on that way?
There's already been an expansion where basically the governor already made a couple of changes where, as did the legislature, the COVID is an automatic reason for someone to receive an absentee. So we are going to see a much larger usage of absentees. At the same time, we're also going to, the governor passed an executive order that people do not even need to sign their absentees for the June primary, which I've got a problem with, but it's an executive order, so it is what it is. But there's been quite a bit of discussion among the election commissioners in the state about the wisdom of saying that people don't even have to sign the application for that absentee. That being said, we'll comply with whatever's put out there we have to comply with. But yes, we're seeing the rules change on a regular basis, and I would suspect we've not seen the last of the changes.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
It
Thank
opens
you.
it up, Dave, so that people can request an absentee by email without needing a signature.
Okay. But you still match the signatures
Right.
against what you have on file anyways,
We
right?
still match them on the ballot. Yes, they still have to sign the back of the envelope on an absentee ballot.
Well, but there's another issue here, and this is an issue that Jenny and I probably will never agree on. And that is that the only control we have over whether a person receives an absentee ballot is whether their application has been filled out properly, including a signature on the application, which also must match. The governor has removed that safeguard, and that's an honest disagreement that Jenny and I are going to have. But ultimately,
Yeah.
the only safeguard will be in the signed envelope with the ballot in it, which basically means the sky's the limit for anyone asking for one.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No, and I think you're right, Tom, Jenny. We've got to plan for the worst, and we'll plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Yep. That's all we can do.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vacancy review.
Yes. So you have the vacancy review summary in your agendas. And on this agenda, you'll see one department speaking to positions, which will be the next item. There'll be two on the services agenda, and then one presented on finance. We stand now at 107 total, and I'll just remind you that we go from August to August since the Vacancy Review Committee was reinstated. And currently we are at an 88.79 immediate fill rate. 30 days is 3.7%. 60 days is also 3.7%. There's none held for 90 days. Just under 1% has been denied, and 2.8% have been held or withdrawn. So the meeting was held remotely, and we'll continue to do that. Much like these meetings, we were able to have the departments join, much like they do for these meetings. So I think, considering the circumstances, it went very well. So the only one on this agenda, unless there's questions, is for planning.
Any questions? Mr. Akers.
Ruth, in one of the things that we received from NISAC, they were urging us to, for counties to actually start planning for a possible 15% reduction. And that 15% reduction has got to come from somewhere. Are you changing the strategy, or how are we going to attain this 15%?
That's a question I can certainly answer, but we've been looking at 15 and 20%, which was, I think, mentioned today as well from the governor. But I think that that's a question I can answer at another time, if that's okay with you.
Okay, I'll accept that. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ruth? Okay. County Administrator's report.
Well, Jason, is Jason out there? Jason, he can speak to the planning position.
Thank
Jason.
you. Thank you, Larry. Yes, this is a position in planning, the office manager position. Our current office manager has been away on sick leave for an extended period of time, and will actually retire the end of this month. We have had a temporary office manager in the position since the 13th of January, and this request is to bring that position, that temporary position, into a permanent office manager position in the planning office. So we'll be abolishing the temporary and filling, or backfilling, I guess, the vacated office manager position.
One of the things that having this position filled on a permanent basis will also free up the Youth Bureau secretary position. As you all know, Alexa Backus has been with us just over a month now, running a department of one. And so this will also, we had authorized the temporary fill. Certainly her efforts have been assisting Office for the Aging, but as many of you know, depending on the circumstances, this is coming into the busy time for the Youth Bureau. So that may help her fill that position depending upon, you know, the candidates that we're able to look at this time, but rather than a temporary position, be able to look at that on a permanent basis as well. So I think it's, in this situation, good all around. Any questions? Okay, thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I will do my county administrator's report on the second agenda, if that's okay.
Okay, that would be fine. So it's time for committee reports. Normally I skip myself, but I will do the Ag and Farmland Protection Board report. We had our meeting on Thursday, April 2nd, via Zoom. And it was it started out kind of interesting because we were bombed. But we had actually all the members were in attendance. And that's when we spoke about the resolution and the statement encouraging landowners to lease marginal lands for solar arrays. Understanding that you know, there wasn't a whole lot of teeth to what we were asking, but felt that it would carry greater weight if it actually came in the form of a resolution that was adopted by the Board of Legislators rather than something that was issued from the Ag and Farmland Protection Board. So I thank everyone for voting for that resolution. And next meeting is not until October. So hopefully when we have our next Ag and Farmland Protection Board meeting, we'll be doing it in person and not via Zoom. Alternatives to Incarceration Board, Mr. Burke.
There's nothing new to report. We haven't had a meeting in the last quarter.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Haggard, Emergency Medical Services Advisory Board, Ms. Curran.
We have not had a meeting in the last quarter either.
Okay, thank you. Environmental Management Council, Ms. Terminelli.
Our meetings have also been canceled.
Okay. Fire Advisory Board. We had a meeting of the Fire Advisory Board on Thursday, April 16th. And we held that via Zoom. I think we had one person, maybe two folks call in by phone. But it was, we had majority of the members that were there. It was very productive. There was some discussion around the training center and county training and how to, in this time of social distancing, how to get some of the necessary training accomplished. There is some training that's going to occur next week. And some OSHA training is going to be done via Zoom. But other than that, there was not a lot of discussion. And our next meeting is Thursday, June 18th. Again, hopefully we'll meet live and not Zoom. Intercounty Legislative Committee, Ms. Archwett.
We have not had any meetings since the New York on pause.
Okay, thank you. Jury Board, Mr. Sheridan.
Jury Board has not met recently.
Okay, thank you. And Planning Board, Mr. Fay.
There was 4 resolutions presented tonight by our Planning Director. At our meeting, we talked about some of our basically solar laws in the town of Norfolk and zoning questions in the town of Potsdam. And the meeting was successfully over Zoom attended. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fay. Old or new business? Does anyone have any old business to bring forward at this point? Any new business? In regards to new business, it's not really new business, but something that I wanted to bring before the committee. On last Thursday, I had an opportunity to speak with actually one of our highway employees, and he happens to be a town board member, town of Russell, and but he wanted me to express his thanks. And the thanks of all the highway employees for for not laying any of them off. They're deeply appreciative of the fact that they've been allowed to work throughout this, or obviously some of them have not been working. They've been working a staggered shift, but no one has lost any pay. And I think it's I was really pleased to hear it, and I told him I would be happy to convey his sentiments to the board, and but that I would not use his name. And he asked me, he said no, he says please use my name, and it's Charlie Kerr, and he's actually I believe Charlie's one of the union steward. So it's just it was really good to hear how much it's appreciated. We've got some good people, and they're happy that we're taking care of them. We do have a need for executive session, but that will occur at the end of services. Mr. Forsythe.
Larry, and I appreciate that. On the flip side, I've been talking to several people of late. The hospitals are laying off hundreds. Heparin, I think, is furloughing 100. Potsdam's going to lay off or furlough 400. Mr. Akers brought up a point earlier that I think definitely needs to be discussed if this is going to continue on. I myself, as an employer, have made my employees whole, but for how long is going to be the next question. So there's some interesting conversations that should arise here. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Arquette.
Bruce, can you tell me of the employees that are considered not?
Mr. Denisha, nice of you to recognize and express the sentiments of the worker, but you described it as that he's thankful that we're taking care of them. I think it's important to say that they're coming in and doing an honest day work for an honest day's job. It's not as though we're taking care of them. They're in turn taking care of us and all the people of the county. Thank you.
Yeah. Good point. Ms. Arquette.
Can you tell me, Ruth, what is the percentage of employees that we have that are working from home?
We are working from a 50% standpoint right now. So the department that sees the biggest fluctuation is social services, as you might imagine, with folks who actually are moving more in a 7-day-a-week schedule to reduce the office density. But at any given time, we're working under the 50% at or below. Okay. And with our 806 positions, that would mean just under 400.
If I may.
There's a question. Go ahead.
Just a question. At this time, the employees that are not working from home, their pay and their benefits are already budgeted, correct?
That's true.
Okay. So right now, we're okay. We don't have to worry about any layoffs. We can take care of our employees.
Right now, we're doing our best to continue providing services to the public that are expected because none of the offices have closed. So I think we've adapted to the work environment quickly. I think that our staff who are not able, let's say highway as an example, to conduct their duties from home are available to work. And that was a direction given by the board to provide them, as long as they're available to work, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later, that they are paid. So they could be called in if there was an emergency or anything like that, or for reasons of quarantine or isolation of staff who are working in the office, those folks would be called in. We continue to operate such that if employees do not want to be available to us and are not in the office, that they use benefit time like they have all time. There's no change to that end. So if they'd not like to be disturbed, if they'd not like to be called in, they'll use benefit time for that. It's the employees who are available to work. Many have laptops at home. Many are also engaging their own home computers to mirror their desktop computer and continue working. They either come in and pick up work, they take it home, they bring it back. So I believe that we are hovering between 85 and 90% of folks capable of working remotely.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Akers.
Thank you. Just for clarification, Ruth, on the highway workers, they're getting a full week's pay for 1 day of work, correct?
Highway workers are being paid for 40 hours every week. No change. If they do not want to be called in, they'll use benefit time and be paid.
Okay, so are they coming in like 1 day a week though?
If they are scheduled, yes. If they are scheduled and they don't come in, they're using benefit time.
Okay. So my point is, even though the money has been budgeted, that we're expecting a 15% reduction that we need to come from someplace. And I think we're reaching that time period. We've been almost a month into this right now. We actually have been a month throughout. Basically, it was March 17th when you went to the 50%. And I think there's still a lot of work that is being done online, but I think it's something that we need to start taking a look at. The number of public employees in St. Lawrence County, I believe, is between teachers and county and whatever is about 40%, which means that the other 60% may have lost their jobs to no fault of their own, and there's no income coming in at all. So I think the fact that the money is budgeted, that still has to be collected this coming year for the next year. And I think that that if this continues, if we don't have adequate testing so that we can test our employees and put some type of protocol in place so that we can actually get some production for the money that we're spending back up to the level. Of course, we're still at that 50% mandated, but I think it's something that we need to prepare for and plan for.
That is and has been underway. I believe that we are getting an honest day's work when folks are scheduled, and if they're called in, they report unless there is a circumstance that their department head is aware of. I think that we are unique to the 60% you spoke to in that when we aren't employing folks, we exacerbate our own problem because we need social services folks available to take care of their needs. So we have to carefully consider what our options are, and we're doing that. Trust in the fact that we're looking at everything, and we're looking at benchmarks with changes, and we're watching the numbers, which you'll hear about at the beginning of the next meeting.
Just to clarify, I'm in no way suggesting that we're not getting an honest day's work when someone is here. What I'm saying is that there's not everybody that can actually provide services to the county, and they're still continuing to be paid. That's my
Understood. Understood.
Ms. Arquette.
Ruth, can you just clarify for the highway department? It's not everyone is working 1 day and getting paid a week, correct? We have people that are coming in and they're working.
We do, and today, was part of my report, but I'll go ahead and speak to highway now. As you all know, highway operations at the physical facilities were shut down last week, though they were available because as designated by the state, not the county, they're an essential service. So they were available, and if you recall, we had a wind event that required folks to respond, and they did so. We have changed today to step up our efforts because of both the seasonal change and the work expected in the coming weeks. So we will see approximately half of the workforce here on every other week. So, but also remember that there are complex health issues related to some of our staff that don't allow them to come into work. If you'll recall, the board indicated in quarantine or isolation situations that we're to keep employees whole. This was the second week of March before any of this began. So I would answer your question by saying that employees the schedule is increased this week. Today was their first day back. They were provided with 600 gloves, over 140 masks, and all of the trucks were provided with disinfectant to be used, as well as we had a contractor in, as many of you probably saw, clean the facilities as well as the vehicles. I hope that's helpful, Nancy.
Yeah.
Nancy?
Just one more thing with the employees. Certainly this is unprecedented times. I don't think this is any of us could have anticipated. And is this not why we have reserves, so that we can continue to support the services in the community, and we can continue to take care of our employees and make sure that we don't have the need for layoffs? In other words, it's not going to go on forever.
Okay.
We hope not.
Mr. Burke?
I think it's important to remember that the social distancing, the steps that we've taken as a county were for the safety of the entire county, 100% of the county. That this was the primary focus. I would have to believe that most people, whether they're being paid or not paid, would love to return to work. So we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the main impetus here is to protect the health of all of our county residents, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. This isn't a gift to our employees. This is an essential strategy to help control the spread of a deadly virus. And I don't think we should lose sight of that.
Mr. Arquette?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, as we move forward and take a look at our numbers and our employment levels, I think that many of us in the room have made the statement that times like these, if we were to make a layoff, there will be compensation to a degree to those employees, but it'll continue to be money coming just from a different pocket of each one of us. So I think that should be a part of the argument as well, that to relieve them of their opportunity to help our public here in St. Lawrence County. We're just getting the money out of a different pocket. So I want to take that into consideration as well. Thank you.
Mr. Akers?
Not to belabor it, I appreciate Mr. Burke's comments. So if mine were misinterpreted, I in no way insinuated that it's a gift. My point is that much like what Dave has said, and much like the point of the hospitals, they've sustained their employees till it got to a fiscal problem. All across the country, hospitals are laying off staff because other elective surgeries and such are not taking place. And what all I'm pointing out is that we will reach a period of time of how long that we can actually continue to pay and be fiscally sound and pay our employees if this isn't rectified.
Mr. Burke?
Well, in keeping with that, Kevin, I would hope that that we would find creative ways to continue to provide the services to our residents, so that unlike the healthcare workers, the hospitals have been prohibited from doing any elective procedures, elective surgeries. So they're unique in the loss of their revenue. But for our county employees, the services that each and every department renders are all critical services. And if we need to have a change in how we deliver those services, then that's what we should do. But I certainly can't foresee, nor would I want the message to be out there to any of our employees that the services that they have loyally provided would in any way be compromised down the road.
Does anyone have anything else to add? Okay, this is your last chance. As I said, we do have a need for executive session, but that will occur after the Services Committee. So we are adjourned.
Larry, we're gonna wipe down the areas before you guys switch, so.
That's good, because I don't want to sit where he's been sitting.
We'll just take a couple minutes to change the chairman if you want to stretch your legs, or we'll be right back with you.
You gonna sit here, Larry?
Yeah, I'll sit there, Billy. But don't sit here until, they're gonna clean it up.
Okay, all right, I'm just gonna set this over.
I don't want to catch any heebie-jeebies like that. I think, man, I think about the stores, we passed them out.
Don't forget your binder over here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
This was
You paused it, Dylan? The black screen. Okay, that's good.
This time I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's the meeting of April Services Committee meeting 2020. I'd like to see if I can get a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
And we got Rita Kern and seconded by
Danny Fay.
Dan Fay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carried. Now for approval of minutes, we have a motion to approve the March 16th minutes. Ms. Kern and Mr. Perkins, seconds. Any discussion? No discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Carried. All right, next we have an update by Dr. Williams and Dana McGuire. And I think we'll have Dr. Williams go first. That's okay with you, Doctor?
That'd be fine.
Okay, Doctor, thank you for being here, and you can proceed.
Sure. So good evening, everyone. So I was going to give a broad overview, and then I think Dana has a number of things to add as well. So in terms of our current status with COVID-19, right now we have 128 cases in the county. We have tested 1,432 individuals in the county as of this morning, which means that we've tested approximately 1.3% of our county's population. The percentage that are positive is currently 9.4%. We've spent a great deal of time trying to increase our testing in the community. And since the last meeting that I spoke at, both St. Lawrence Health System and Claxon Hepburn Medical Center have created testing centers, as well as hotlines, so that people can call and either talk to the hospitals or talk to public health if they feel that they're a candidate for testing for COVID. You may have seen that some of the surrounding counties have fewer cases, and that might be a point of discussion. It's important to look at the number of tests that those counties have done. And just for example, Franklin County has done 253 tests, and Hamilton County has done 28 tests, Herkimer 513, Lewis 213, and really only Jefferson has done sort of an equivalent number of tests of their population. So I think what we've seen is that there was, from an epidemiologic perspective, there was an initial kind of quick rise, and we talked at my last meeting about the rapid doubling rate. That's slowed down, but what we're seeing is just sort of a steady daily increase. The counts differ from day to day, but we have between 3 and 10 new cases per day. It still seems to be following a pattern that we call like a propagative pattern. So we're able to identify a patient with COVID-19, and then we can connect the dots to the other people that we know also have the illness. We don't have at this point any documented community-wide spread. However, as I'll talk about later, that may reflect just the limited testing that's being performed. What I would say, however, is that I think this is now several weeks into this. I think what we're seeing is what you would expect to see in a county that's really carefully prepared for this kind of a pandemic, and a county that's had an opportunity to implement the social distancing, decreasing necessary travel, and really aggressively tested and utilized public health measures like quarantine and isolation. I think this is why we're seeing sort of a flat type of curve, as people are familiar with that term. I would point out, however, that I think there's every reason to believe that our peak is potentially weeks away. We did start this later than New York City, and there's really no indication in the numbers that that we've had our peak yet. One thing that Dana and I have talked about is trying to look at the different groups and the different clusters that we see. And really you can divide those groups, I think, into 4 different groups. The first group that we're seeing are travelers who return from high transmission areas. And this was largely occurring before unnecessary travel was restricted. The second group that we see is transmission that occurred at either restaurants or bars in our area prior to the pause order from the governor. And then the third group is we see transmission within family, and that transmission occurred because somebody in the family developed the illness from group 1 or 2. And then the final group that we're seeing is transmission from community dwelling staff who are either in groups 1, 2, or 3, who then work either in a group home or in an institutional setting. And they're then transmitting the illness to the residents in those settings. One of the other questions that's come up is hospital capacity. And I think because of the efforts of public health and because of our ability to sort of flatten the curve and have just a steady increase, but not an exponential increase, both St. Lawrence Health System and Claxton Hepburn Medical Center feel very confident that we, at least right now, have the capacity. So as long as these public health measures are in place, we feel like we can handle the number of patients that are coming in on a daily basis. And the same really goes for mechanical ventilators and the other ventilatory support devices that we have. One of the things that's come out recently is quite a few people around the country and also locally talking about reopening, talking about what the timing would be and what the process would be. What I would say is, number one, there's a lot that we don't know about this virus. I think there are two things that we do know in St. Lawrence County, however. One is that the social distancing measures and other public health measures that we've put into place are definitely working and have reduced the number of cases that we have in the county. I'm confident that if we hadn't done this preparation and put these measures into place, that instead of hundreds of 100 patients, we'd be talking about thousands of patients. And instead of handfuls of people being in the hospital, I'm confident that our hospitals would have been overrun. The second thing that I'm also certain about is that the measures that we've implemented to slow the spread of the virus have clearly caused economic hardship. So those are the two things we know for sure about this virus. I do want to say, however, that we have to be very, very careful when we're discussing this, because reopening too early could be disastrous and could lead to a rapid rise in the rate of illness and certainly, if not that, hasten a second wave of illness. The other thing I think we have to keep in mind is that this virus is not going away. Everything that we see in the international news for countries that have had this illness before us and what we're seeing in other parts of this country is we should expect that the virus will be with us for some time. There's still no vaccine, although one's in development, and there's still really no proven treatment. When people are thinking about reopening, there are at least 6 principles that need to be discussed, and one of the things is timing. And as I said before, I think it's too early right now to talk about reopening in any kind of meaningful way or to plan, but I think we should talk about it and think about what the issues are. Most of the literature suggests that you need to have a sustained decrease in cases for 14 days. We're not seeing that. In fact, we're seeing just the opposite for the past couple of days. I do, however, think that any plans should be regionally based. The epidemiology of this virus is very different in a rural, low population density region. The interventions and the timeframes that are set out for New York City really aren't relevant for our rural region. So I very much support a regional approach to this. And I also think whatever we do is going to have to be staged. If we were to suddenly remove these measures, it would be a disaster. There's not an on-off switch that can be safely thrown. It's more a matter of identifying elements of the economy that could be carefully opened when the timing is right. The other thing that one of the legislators in the previous meeting referred to is testing. And without a robust, systematic testing available, if that's not in place, we can't even really decide whether it's safe to start reopening things. So we need to increase testing of symptomatic individuals, and we're already working on that with a hotline in the testing centers. We need to work on sampling asymptomatic individuals with serologic, so those are the antibody tests, to help determine the prevalence. And New York State Department of Health has already launched a statewide program for that. And then we need to develop in-house or point of care testing so that we can actually do screening of people who are coming to a high-risk setting. But without adequate testing, We don't even know when it's safe to start reopening. And the other thing is, at the point where we talk about reopening, there needs to be an ability to reassess, because if you start to open and then things get bad, you need to know that that's happening. No matter what we do, the intense public health program that's already implemented has to remain. And the final thing I'll mention, which has to happen now as well, is that we need to really be careful about staffing plans, especially for people who are working with group homes or who are working in other institutional settings. We see a pattern where when nurses are going to different houses or at different institutions and moving between groups of patients, that's part of the way that the illness is being transmitted throughout the county. So just to summarize, we do have a number of cases. We have a steady increase, but I think because we've done an excellent job as a county, this is really how things look when there's good planning and good preparation. I know Dana is going to talk, but I really think that we can't emphasize enough the positive effect that having an effective leader with Dana and having a great public health team, Ruth and the whole emergency staff has done a tremendous job, and the support from the legislators has been critical. I think we do have higher numbers than our surrounding communities, largely because we have done a lot more testing. I think the public health measures that we've implemented are clearly effective, and I think they're flattening the curve. I do think there's a role for a regional discussion about a regionally specific, thoughtful, staged reopening when the time is right. But I want to underline that if we abandon the measures that we put into place too early, it would be disastrous, and we need to avoid that. So that's my summary.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Are there any questions? Mr. Akers?
Dr. Williams, we've been on the county website, we've been talking about testing. Are you being deluged with people that are calling in to that want to be tested? Or is the number that to call for testing both at Claxon, at St. Lawrence Health Systems, is that for those that are feeling under the weather, ill, or whatever? Or is it open to the public?
So first of all, those lines are open to the public. However, right now we're still in the mode, and I should say this is rapidly evolving, but right now we're still in the mode of focusing on testing patients with symptoms. And then a pretty narrow category of people who don't have symptoms. And that category is people who are asymptomatic, but have a known contact with somebody with COVID-19. So we're working with New York State Department of Health. People may have heard the governor speak and other people speak about expanding testing. Right now, we're really focusing on people with symptoms or asymptomatic people who had a direct contact with somebody who's proven to have COVID-19.
So when people call, are you kind of like separating them out? Like, have you had symptoms? Have you been in contact? And then say, please don't use our testing at this time?
So when people call, there's a nurse who does the screening. And then if they're appropriate, makes an appointment for them. So it's not a walk-in clinic, or even though you drive up to the testing centers, at least for St. Lawrence Health System, you still need an appointment. And so that's how we're doing it now. We feel that at least for St. Lawrence Health System, our capacity is to test, we say up to 250 people a day. Right now, we haven't tested more than 55 per day.
Okay.
And we're not really turning a lot of people away. We're not getting as many calls as we would expect.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Forsyth? Yes. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. So as of right today, there's about 118 confirmed cases, plus or minus. Is that correct?
128.
128 today.
Yep.
And when did the criteria for testing change? Within the last week or so?
We had confirmation that it changed at the end of last week.
Okay, because up until last week, many people couldn't get tested unless they fit into a certain criteria. Is that correct?
That's correct. And there still are criteria for people to get tested. So, and I would distinguish between testing, which is what we're doing now, and widespread community screening, which is the direction that we'd all like to head. But because of the somewhat limited testing resources, the sense is that we don't have the ability to screen, the entire asymptomatic community at this point, although that's really actually our goal.
Okay, but you say at the present time, you have the ability to test approximately 250 a day.
That's right.
You feel?
Through St. Lawrence Health System.
But we're only doing 50?
Right.
Is anyone being turned away because they don't meet the criteria of those 200?
So when we look at the people who are calling in, we find very few, if any, people who are being turned away. It's actually simply a lack of call volume. And we're keeping close track of it and really trying to err on the side of encouraging people to be tested. Because I think until we test more people, we're going to have a really hard time understanding how prevalent the disease is in our community.
And that's just changed in the last week, you feel?
That's right.
Okay.
And I think there's very confusing messaging that's happening. So on the national level and even on the state level, because testing resources have been limited, there's communication about stewardship that may make sense on a state level, but doesn't necessarily make sense on a regional level. We're doing what we can to push the testing issue and to really, from my perspective, expand the testing that's being done, because again, that's our most important tool.
I agree 100%, and I'm a layman, but in your opinion, how many do you feel countywide of the 118 or 128 as of today that are confirmed? How many would you say in the last month have self-quarantined without the ability to be tested? Is there a number, rough idea?
I wouldn't really feel comfortable giving a number, but again,
would you say it'd be double?
Could be double.
Would you? Yeah.
And
Okay.
I think
That's
one of
all.
the things.
Thank you.
Sure. I'll just add that one of the things that's going to happen is as we start introducing these antibody tests, which document whether somebody has been exposed to the virus and has developed antibodies. Once we start having that information, I think we'll have a much better picture of whether the disease has been present and more extensive in our community, or whether we might be surprised to find that there's actually not a very high prevalence. But until we test more than 1% of the population, a lot of it's really just speculation.
I would hope that somewhere someone's got a list of the people that have self-quarantined and not been tested to help you with that list, because I think you'll find, and there again, I'm a layman, I think you'll find that there's a lot more people that had it that weren't able, because of criteria, to be tested. And they may have these antibodies you talk about. So just a thought. So I hope there's a list of the people that have self-quarantine.
Mr. Burke.
Dr. Williams, the fourth group that you talk about, the fourth cluster group, where transmission is occurring, like within whether it's a group home, people that are rotating from one site to another. Mm-hmm. Is there any way of getting, improving that? Are the organizations involved aware of our concerns and what they need to do?
They are, and there's been conversation either with Dana, or I've had conversations with the leadership of the different organizations. And I should point out that many of them, if not all of them, have already made changes. It's just things that have happened 3 weeks ago, for instance, now are kind of playing out. And one of the things that occurs with this illness is because it seems to last for 10 to 30 days. you see one person develop it, and then 10 days later, another person develops it. So a lot of these organizations have made these important staffing changes already, and we've certainly advised them to. Dana may talk about one particular institution we're concerned about, where there may be some opportunities for improvement, but by and large, people do recognize that this is an issue. I would also say that going forward, I think this is one of our maybe less strongly emphasized, but more important things, again, is looking at staffing models, whether it's in a healthcare setting or an institutional setting or another setting, even in a work setting, if people do start coming back to work a little bit, is to try and really have small groups of people who are exposed to one another, so that you don't suddenly find that 30 people have now become ill because somebody was going between different groups in a work setting.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions of Dr. Williams? If not, I think it's your turn, Dana, to take the stage. I can't hear you. I can see your lips moving though. Push that button.
I do this.
There you go.
Thanks very much, Dr. Williams. I think you gave a great summary, and we work very closely on a daily basis. And I'd have to say that the coordination that we have with all the partners, just whether it be the hospitals, the nursing homes, senior high-rises, group homes, all of the institutions, we've been working with them just kind of right along. And so they're all kind of looking for the consultation. We try to give kind of just the ideas that we can do. And so I think that has been going well. And I think, what has been said is this has started a few weeks ago. And so this does last just quite a while. I just wanted to go over, so with like we have 128 cases. Right now, we have just about 225 people who are in the quarantine process or the isolation process. We've seen about 500 people. And so, that lasts for up to 14 days for when you're on quarantine. And it kind of varies for when you're on the isolation based on the symptoms that you have. And so that's an up and down kind of process that we've been working on. And as I've mentioned before, we're all very kind of interested in who gets off of the isolation or what that like the recovery rate is. And so there's two ways to really know what that is. And the first one is that you are tested again. And you have to have two tests within a 24-hour period that come back to be negative. Without doing that, we're using the non-test strategy, which is you have to have no fever for 72 hours, just without the use of a medication, and a significant decrease of the other symptoms. And that has to be at least 7 days since the symptoms started. And so when you really look at that, if we know that this virus can last up to 30 days, while the have kind of decreased, we don't actually know if you're totally kind of done with the virus and what the shedding can still be. And so that's what we're still working on. So I think as we can test more to know who has the virus, and then do some of the testing with the serology tests to see who might be, through it all, I think that's going to be just kind of very helpful. We have been working just really hard on the quarantine process and on the isolation process. We have trained more of our own staff and some of the other county departments and some of the volunteers to help us with the contact tracing. We have some cases that have, say, like 60 contacts that we have to go through. With some of the healthcare agencies, we are really working hard. If they are an essential worker, we make sure that they are an essential worker. So it can't be, just be that someone wants to go back to work, but if they were not there, it would bring a hardship to the agency. And these essential workers, kind of whether it's healthcare or if it's another type of an organization, you cannot have you can't have any of the symptoms. Sure that people are asymptomatic, and we work through that process, and we make sure that if they can be working, that then they follow just a process. And this is quite lengthy. There's a lot of back and forth that goes. It kind of lengthens the contact tracing portion. And so we're working very hard with all of the partners just to really see who needs to be working and who we can try to quarantine so that we can try to decrease or break that transmission. Really working hard, just doing, I would say, in the last 1 to 2 weeks. We have had some quarantine needs that we've been trying to work out. So we have some people that go into quarantine and we learn that they can't take care of themselves on their own. And that poses a problem because when you're in quarantine, you need to isolate yourself. So we take a look at how can we manage that. Can we have still come in, or do we have to try to look at a placement? We've had to use more of our external placements for people who do not have locations that would be appropriate to isolate from the other members just in their household. So that we've been working on quite strongly too. We've had to use the other departments just of the county, being the social services department, the community services, just trying to look at all of the needs that we have for the people who may be in isolation or quarantine. And lastly, we've really been trying to work hard on what the information is that we're trying to provide to the community. So we are still doing the map. We do just have a new graphic that goes out on social media, and we are doing more graphs as well. So we have just a student working with us. So you should be trying to look at trends of the cases that we have on a daily basis with regard to how much testing that we've been done. And so that will help us to see kind of when we're still on the rise and then when it starts to come down. We have been using the testing numbers from the states. It's called the COVID tracker site. And this testing number is off compared to what had been reported from Dr. Williams. We're just trying to look at how do we report the results. We are having some challenges with the testing results coming through the state system. And I believe that's why the state's numbers are off with the case numbers and with the testing numbers. We have been helping out just with the phone line as well. So I would really say in the last 3 days, we have had a phone where we do consult people who do have questions on just whether they can be tested. And then when we go through the contact tracing process, we test anyone who has been in contact with a positive, who has had some of the symptoms, or if they're in a living situation where they're with someone who has health complications, and it would make sense just to do that test. So we have kind of really tried to just try to open up who we do the testing for. And so those have been our main actions kind of over the last week.
Mr. Arkwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dana and Dr. Williams. Very good reports. You know, we're all listening, I think, to the findings and the theories of experts and doctors at every level of government. And I appreciate this coming from two people that know the demographics of our county, and appreciate very much you standing in the front lines to minimize this to a degree. But I just wanted to add that I also appreciate Dr. Williams mentioning the detriment to the economic side of this. And I think it's just very important for all of our constituents to know that the health and safety of all of our citizens come first, but we are all cognizant and very, very well aware of the tremendous detriment to many small businesses and big businesses alike throughout this process. So we're cognizant of it. I think that we're all eager to move forward, but I think it's so important that we wait till the timing is right. So thank you for all that you're doing.
Any further questions? looks like. Mr. Akers, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Williams, is your hospital following any of the studies that have been done? I know there's been a controlled study done. I think the company is it Gilligan? It's the drug is actually for Ebola. There's a study being going on that seems quite positive.
Yeah, so Gilead is the pharmaceutical company, and it's called Remdesivir is the name of the medication. So we're actually kind of lucky, and even though we're a small rural community hospital, or well, we're in a rural community, our hospital actually has a research division and some very talented physicians and folks who are working on really staying on top of what options we have for treatment. There are actually a number of options besides Remdesivir that we're looking at and kind of helping to participate in trying to determine what's most effective. One of our researchers is actually probably going to start a research study that will be done locally with a medication that's similar to Remdesivir. So we're aware of it, and it can be obtained if you're part of a study or if for compassionate use.
Okay. The second question I have is what you talked about with the social distancing and the procedures and the protocols we have in place now, and it's not going away. So we'll have to continue at least some type of protocol in place so that we don't overwhelm the hospitals. So eventually we will reach herd immunity. Is that what, it may not be the goal, but that could be the end result, much like what Sweden is doing now?
Yeah, I mean, so there's lots of challenging questions about immunity in this virus. There's information, Sweden is taking the strategy of trying to create herd immunity. Meanwhile, South Korea is reporting that people are not developing immunity.
Oh.
So you can't really have herd immunity if you don't have immunity. So it's a very tricky virus. And I hope actually that what happens is that we develop a safe and effective vaccine. I think long term, that's the thing that will help us in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Matt Denner is also prepared to speak to PPE as well.
Who's that?
Matt Denner,
Matt? Okay, Matt.
Dylan can bring him in as well.
All right, go ahead, Dylan. Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Matt. Go ahead. We can hear you. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can everybody see the screen?
Okay, we're able to hear you as well.
Okay, can you see the screen that I'm sharing with you all?
There you are.
Yes.
Yeah, I see it now, loud and clear.
All right. I just wanted to give you an update where we all were with the PPE.
You're on. Go ahead.
All right. As you know, we have the call center out. Requests for PPE are coming in. We got some complaints that are coming in, people that aren't compliant. We do receive some donations. We also are screening calls for information with help for getting different other kind of information or what they should be doing. We're doing some distribution. The distribution that we got is all coming from, some of it was procured by the county. A lot of it is from the stockpile from New York State, and some of it is from donations. And I was asked to show you guys what we've got for numbers so far. So as you can see in the list that I supplied you, these are kind of the main stuff that's going out for the PPE. Burn rates, that's a weekly burn rate. That's when we reached out in the beginning to all our nursing homes, our hospitals, our first responders, long care, urgent care. And these are the numbers that they told us are going to be going through with this stuff in a week. So with that being said, since the first request went in 6 weeks ago, so that's where we get our required numbers that you see in the next column. What we received, that's what we received as of date today. And that's kind of in the end column is the percentage of everything that we've gotten so far. So depending on, what the PPE is, what the percentage is.
Okay.
We also have, this is our priorities for distribution. As the stuff comes in, you see everything, 52% of the stuff goes to hospitals. It goes all the way down to priority 7, which is 3%. So it's broke up. When the PP comes in, we punch it into a spreadsheet that Jonathan Mitchell and Dylan Sofa put together, and it kind of calculates things out for us. So then we know what we're giving out to everybody fast. And any questions?
If you have a question, legislators, say your name and I'll. I wasn't able to see it. Now I can see it. Go ahead. Mr. Burke?
Yeah, Matt, the second category under the N95 mask, what does that stand for?
Oh, sorry, that's standard procedure masks. Those are the ones that kind of go behind your ear a little bit with the cloth front.
And the ambulance, that category of ambulance and the other chart, does that include first responders?
Priority 2 is our ambulance services. Those are our transporting agencies.
And where do first responders come in? Down number 6 or 7, was it? Or?
They come into 5. You got urgent care and stuff that go into 4. And then right after urgent cares and nursing homes is our 5. Those are our firemen and our first responders.
Okay, thank you.
I did get word tonight, guys, that we might be getting another shipment of PPE in. I'll keep you all updated, or I'll have Ruth keep you updated if we get more information.
Thank you, Matt. Any more questions from the legislators? Being none, thank you very much for your information. Dana, I think you're up next again. We're going to be starting resolutions. And thank you very much for Dr. Williams, from me as well as everyone else. We all feel the same. Dana, I've watched your radio or listened to your radio interviews. They've been very informative. The postings that you send us for the legislators to look at are very helpful, and they're on a regular basis. So we think you're doing a good job. So we'll go on to resolutions. First resolution is modifying the 2020 budget for the Public Health Department to accept an Excelis Blue Cross Blue Shield BCBS Community Health Award. And need a motion. Motion
So moved.
By Dave
Danny
Forsyth and seconded by Dan Fay. Go ahead, Dana.
So this award is for $4,000, and that we received it to improve our maternal child health program. And this is how to help build rooms for all the county departments, so that each building at least has one where new moms could do breastfeeding, or they could express their milk. And so that's what we use the funds for.
Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next resolution, authorizing the chair to sign an agreement with Health Research Incorporated for COVID-19 response and modifying the 2020 budget for public health. I got a motion. Ms. Kern and Ms. Terminelli, seconds. And go ahead, Dana.
So I've talked about this one before. It was first for $15,000. It went up to 116, and now it's up to 166,000. Funds are provided based on the size of the county and the population. And this is now what it is. Funds will go towards staff time. As you know, we've moved our department from 5 days to 7 days. We do have some overtime. Most of that overtime is into the 40-hour time. We do have some staff that are going over the 40 hours. Part of these funds will help to pay for the motel or hotel that we have to put people up for isolation and the quarantine process, for some of the supplies, and just for some of the needs that we may have when people are in the quarantine process.
Thank you. Any discussion? There being no discussion, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carried. The next resolution is modifying the 2020 budget for community services for funding from New York State opioid response. We have a motion. We got a motion by, got a problem here. I gotta get my long distance glasses going too. Yeah, Tony Arkwit and Ms. Kern. Seconds. Okay, go ahead. Looks like we got Jay.
Yes, good evening.
You here, Jay? There,
Can you
thank
hear
you.
me?
Yep, I can see you and hear you.
Okay. So approximately a month and a half ago, I would say, we applied for and subsequently were awarded $15,000 from the state opioid response grant for telehealth equipment for running virtual sessions and virtual clinics. So we plan to purchase 10 more laptops, 9 more ProZoom HIPAA compliant licenses, and a projector for our Narcan trainings. So this is a resolution to accept the funds and to modify the budget.
Any questions of Jay? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. We have another resolution authorizing the chair to sign a memorandum of understanding with Alcohol and Substance Abuse Council of Jefferson County, DBA Pivot, to implement the triple positive parenting program. Do we have a motion? Motion by Ms. Terminelli, seconded by Ms. Kern. And go ahead, Jay.
All right, this is a grant that Pivot from Jefferson County, they were the lead agency on this. It's a tri-county grant with us, Lewis County, as well as Jefferson County, to implement a evidence-based treatment platform for running. Initially, it's going to be running groups for children and families who are at high risk of substance use, or there is substance use within the family. One of the things that we want to target in St. Lawrence County is families that are receiving services through Child Protective There's no cost to the county for this, with the exception of the time that it takes for staff to be trained. And we're training 2 staff, we hope.
Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Carried. We have another resolution proclaiming May as Older Americans Month with the proclaiming May as Older Americans.
Go back up to community services. Modifying the 2020, sorry, Bill.
Which one?
Modifying.
Modifying the 2020 budget?
Yep, for funding.
Okay, I see her. I skipped that one. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Ruth.
It's okay.
Modifying the 2020 budget for community services for funding received from NYS Oasis for pass-through funding to approve agencies, move for its adoption. Tony Arkwit, and seconded by, looks like Kevin Akers. And go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, last week we received an updated state aid letter from Oasis that increased the revenues for the 3 agencies shown here: St. Joe's, North Country Freedom Home, and Seaway Valley Prevention Council. The increase of state aid was to support salary and fringe increases for direct care and support staff, as well as for minimum wage increases.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
So I'm also,
Bill, he's got 2 more items on, the monthly update, and then he's also got another discussion item.
How about, have we done we gotta do the proclamation of older Americans?
Yeah, if Jay could finish before we go on to aging.
I've got,
They're not any items.
they're not in here?
No, they're in Google Drive. I've got this.
Okay.
This one, Bill?
Okay, the next one's in Google Drive, but not on my paperwork.
Jay, you want to do the monthly update first?
Go ahead.
sure. So by March 18th, we went to a virtual clinic. Currently, we have about 9 to 10 staff working in the office, with the remainder of the 30 staff working from home. We have several staff that are out. 2 are out for COVID-related reasons, and 1 is out just for health-related reasons. So our staff quickly adapted to the Zoom platform, and are currently providing all the services remotely. Last week, we have a production standard or billable face-to-face standard of 72%. Last 2 weeks, mental health was at 74% of face-to-face billable hours. The chemical dependency clinics averaged about 44%. Some of that is the referrals are flat right now. Again, it has to do with the bail reform, but then also I think that having the courts closed temporarily has affected some people's motivation to follow through with the recommendations of the court and probation. So we'll be following up and have followed up with probation on those individuals and hopefully get them re-engaged in services.
Any questions?
The recent no-show rates since we moved to a remote clinic has dropped on average about 1%. 1% no-show rates as a result of doing in-home services.
Jay, do you want to highlight the provider prescriber visits? That seems to be a statistic this month that's worth noting.
So, we have 3 providers, 1 psychiatrist and 2 nurse practitioners. And the 1 is a locum tenens contracted employee who has the highest numbers currently. And the other 2 have done well adapting to, the use of Zoom. I think people, the recipients have quickly adapted to the use of that modality and seem to feel comfortable in its use. So the attendance and the no-show rate for those receiving medication management has also decreased.
John has his hand up. You see John?
Mr. Burke has.
Mr. Burke.
Mr. Burke?
Jay, on the prescriber visits, are they 15-minute visits or what's the time block on each of those?
Yes. For the medication-assisted treatment visits, it's difficult to do 15 minutes. They do some, but not a lot, because the way we have it set up, they are seen by the nurse first, and that actually takes as long or sometimes longer than a medication management appointment would. So on that side of the clinic and that side of those services, it's hard to do the 30 minutes. On the mental health side, there are some people that are now being seen for 15-minute medication management appointments, yes.
Follow-up, please. Bill, could I have a follow-up?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Burke.
So I guess what I'm wondering, especially with the contractor one, is that the locum, the contractor number one?
Yes.
So do we pay him for 7 hours or 8 hours, Jay?
6.5.
6.5 hours. Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, independent of the nurse time, the amount of time, the utilization for the higher paid positions, where we stand with that. If the person was seeing 9 patients and his time averaged 20 minutes or 30 minutes, that at least that would give us a ballpark idea of the utilization of the higher paid positions.
So you're talking face-to-face billable contact you're asking for?
Yeah. Well, it's all telemedicine now.
Right. But still face-to-face with the telemedicine, yes.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we can provide that.
Well, I guess I wasn't looking for another reporting component. I was more interested in having some idea as to the efficient utilization of the locum.
Well, I mean, again, it's I guess with some of the individuals, we wouldn't necessarily have to put them in front of the nurse. We think it's best practice to have them see the nurse. But
well, the nurse isn't my question though, Jay. The only question I have is the amount of time the psychiatrist is spending with each individual that collectively adds up to that 8.79.
well, again, they're first seen by the nurse, which is a 30-minute appointment. So, and then they see the prescriber immediately following the nurse assessment. So it would be difficult if the nurse is on 30-minute increments, which is what it's required. The timeline is that they need to that nurse assessment and put all that information into the computer so that the doctor has that when they're being seen for the medication appointment. If they almost have to be in sync with one another for that to work, unless we have them not see the nurse prior to them getting their medication renewal.
Mm-hmm.
We pay about $4,300 a month, or every 4 weeks, for the locums tenens. The revenue generation, is incrementally increased. From 323 to 4.3, the revenue was $6,000 and $6,050. So even though it is an expensive service, it is paying for itself at this point.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Bill, I have another question for Jay, not under this category, but it relates to the COVID-19, Jay.
Yes.
The stressors that are in the community, job loss, food insecurity, lower access to health care, all the stressors that are there are magnified for people with mental illness. And I guess I'm just wondering, how are we addressing that?
Well, I think we continue to see, our clientele, on an as-needed basis in terms of the frequency, so that hasn't changed. We haven't really seen an uptick in new referrals that's significant at this point. We've been getting some referrals from public health with people who are in isolation and are having anxiety. This week we'll be issuing some press releases allowing the community to know that, that our clinics are still open and we're accepting new patients if, they have any new symptoms or exacerbation of old systems, that we can see them almost the same day, if not the same day.
So with the advent of this virus, you haven't seen a need to do anything other than what we had been doing before that?
Well, I mean, we've been, as the DCS, I've been in contact with, some of the other providers. Community services clinics had a little bit of a leg up in terms of being able to transition to virtual clinics. Many of the other clinics are using telephonic correspondence with, I think, during these times, if that's, what they can provide, then we have to go with that until, they hopefully maybe get more geared up with the electronics to be able to do live two-way face-to-face service provision.
Has the Community Services Board changed their focus with the advent of COVID-19? Have they done any additional planning or assessment?
Well, I mean, I think, we're kind of in early stages of this. I mean, right now, I think everybody's just trying to, adjust to, change in the workforce, that being not being able to be, present, in the clinic and do remote services. So I think, that's been kind of the first wave, of transition that, all the providers have had to do and accomplish since this began.
Okay, thank you, Jay.
Any further questions? If not, we'll move on to resolution. We have a resolution. What's that?
One more item Jay has.
Jay's got another item. Okay, go ahead, Jay.
Okay, so this has to do with the opioid treatment program. And of course, we had Dr. Updike speak to you all last month. And so I'm just wanting to circle back around and give you a little bit of the landscape that I'm experiencing, and trying to, make decisions, along with the Community Services Board about some of the funding that we have. Currently, we have $250,000 of SOAR monies that were originally designated for telehealth equipment and transportation, bringing on providers, prescribers, counselors, purchase of vehicles, and things like that. So, as you know, OASIS has been encouraging us to look, within the county for either the county clinics and or another provider in the county to open up an opioid treatment program, because, there's not any in between Watertown and Lake Champlain. So they've allowed us, they've kind of given us permission to use those SOAR monies, to start up an opioid treatment program. So in addition to COVID, we're also continuing to have to deal with the opioid epidemic. And, that, seems to be being exacerbated by the COVID. There's not as much street drugs out there because some of the trafficking has been shut down, the border being closed. I think it's a little more difficult, for drugs to come out of New York City right now. Although we do have people that are going down into New York City and have, meeting with what they call the cash doctors and coming back with, sometimes 3, 4, and even more types of medications, including Suboxone, but also, other controlled substances, and bringing them back for their own use, but then run out quickly because they're either taking more than they should because of the stressors they're experiencing, or selling them on the street because there appears to not be as much drugs on the streets right now. So we have our clinics have about 84 MAT patients right now. 78% of those have to have a 7-day Suboxone prescription or less. Some of them can only manage 2 or 3-day subscription. So the insurance companies, are having difficulty with that because they're saying that if you have to provide 2-day scripts or 3-day scripts, then they really need a higher level of care, that being the opioid treatment program. So, they're not really in favor of us continuing that practice. Plus, every time that happens, there's additional co-pays, for our recipients. So I think, in terms of the total county, there's approximately probably 500 MAT patients that are being served, with Suboxone. So our percentage is 78. And even if the other providers have, say, a 50% caseload of severe users that are not being held by Suboxone, that's could be upwards to 250 patients that could use an opioid treatment program. In addition to the SOAR monies, there's a federal grant that we've looked at. It's actually for up to $900,000. The county would have to be the applicant for that. We've run it through the planning department. They think we may have fairly good odds of being able to get the award. Of course, that's yet to be seen, but I didn't necessarily want to apply and take the efforts from our department and also planning department to fill out, a federal application, which can be quite arduous and complicated, and they're very, picky in terms of how they want the grant submitted. So, still looking, we have, in addition to, us community services, i.e. me and our program director, Shana Smith, having an interest in opening an opioid treatment program, there's at least one other provider in the community that is asking that they be allowed to open an opioid program, possibly 2 other providers. So, I know we had Dr. Updike, come and talk about, what exactly that service provides. I didn't know if there was any other questions that people had in terms they would need answered in terms of making a decision as to whether this is something that the county would like to pursue, or if it's something that another interested party, we would let another interested party go ahead and try to open up such a program within the county.
Yes, go ahead.
calling on me.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Burke.
Well, Jay, from the data that you gave us, it sounds like there's about 250 patients who aren't being managed well with Suboxone treatment. Is that correct? Did I understand?
Approximately, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
our average is, it has to do with the severity of their use. I mean, Suboxone, it really depends on the motivation of the individual, right? But, if someone is a heavy user of heroin, an IV user, Suboxone is sometimes not enough to hold them, and they continue to crave and seek drugs in the community, and also, abuse their Suboxone. So we have, our population is 78% of the 84 patients have severe use. So, I would think across the board, I would think any other providers that are providing the MAT services, I'm just estimating, but even if it was just 50% and not 78%, it'd be approximately potentially 250 patients that could benefit from the program over time.
And the long-term efficacy of methadone treatment it is about 80% recovery after a 10-year period, or somewhere around there, I believe, is what was told to us. Is that fairly accurate?
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Updike, spoke to, kind of comparing it to someone who has diabetes or high blood pressure, that, it is a chronic illness. People who have been on heroin for an extended period of time, it does cause, chemistry in the brain to change in terms of the receptors. So, there's some that would argue that opioid addiction is a lifelong struggle.
Is this program, would this program be revenue neutral, Jay? I mean, not that that's the number one concern. I'm just wondering, as we look to see who should do it, if it should be done at all.
I have not heard of an OTP program not, being revenue neutral. Conifer Park, who runs the program in Plattsburgh, is a for-profit agency. So they do rely on having a positive revenue stream in order to keep that program going. Credo in the past has also ran in the black. Oasis, and again, it's not the number one reason, but Oasis also, thought that having an OTP and it being a revenue positive program would help to offset some of the costs of the current addiction treatment clinics.
Well, I'll just give my opinion. I'm only one person, Jay. The 250 people who for the most part are living quite dangerously, perhaps mixing Suboxone with street drugs. If we can provide a treatment that has the track record of methadone, in my opinion, we should embrace it.
Rita.
Rita Kern.
Hi. So, I always have a mixed thing on methadone versus Suboxone, because people who are on Suboxone, not the Suboxone without naloxone, but just straight Suboxone, their receptors blocked and they can't overdose, right? Methadone doesn't have that nicety. If you're on methadone and you use more heroin, you overdose. People generally are kept sort of, their craving is more satiated by it. So if they're really looking for recovery, you do get some better numbers on that. but most methadone is lifelong, just like most Suboxone, if we're really honest, is lifelong or for a
Right.
very long period of time.
Yes.
I have noticed during the COVID-19 that I have more people that are just electively going off their Suboxone and using street drugs again, just because this is as overwhelming to them as it is to everybody else. I don't know that you get better numbers over time out of methadone than you do Suboxone. If you really look at all the studies, I'd want to see a lot more, and to see what Erie County did with their program. Really look at that, because they seem to have fixed a lot of what they have going on in their county with opioids, and they've done it with Suboxone.
Mr. Akers.
Thank you. We do have our chemical dependency director here, Sheena Smith. John, I didn't hear 80% recovery. I thought it was basically lifelong use, that once they're on the methadone, they were going to continue. Sheena, could you speak to that? I mean, this is your forte. Yep,
Sheena?
on mute. Okay.
I got it. Sorry. With methadone, it's one of the oldest, longest studies, treatments for opioid use disorder. And it's considered by all as the gold standard. They refer to it as the gold standard. And recovery or success is kind of gauged differently by different groups of people. So 80% recovery doesn't necessarily mean that the 80% of people get off methadone and are drug-free forever. So that's kind of like, when you get into statistics, it can be looked at a lot of different ways. So when they talk about those high numbers, it's likely that the success is defined by whatever the study is. But all the studies unanimously, the longer they stay in any sort of MAT, whether it be Suboxone, if it's appropriate, if they're appropriately in Suboxone or on methadone, the longer they stay on, the better they're going to do. They're going to have jobs, they're going to have their families back, and they're going to do better. But the 80% is hard because it depends on how it's defined. I don't think 80% of them after 10 years get off Suboxone and are completely drug-free. No, I don't.
Thank you, Sheena.
I mean, not Suboxone, methadone.
Thank you. So I think the question that Jay is asking is, do you want a clinic in St. Lawrence County? And if you do want a clinic in St. Lawrence County, do you want the county to run it, or do you want some other private entity to run it? So I think that's what Jay's looking for not necessarily a straw vote, but definitely a discussion, considering what that would do for your communities. I mean, you do have approximately 250 people that are on some type of controlling mechanism to try and keep them off street drugs, and that we're actually seeing them. So I think that's what Jay is looking for a discussion.
Go ahead, Mr. Reagan.
Mr. Chair, could I direct this question to Jay? What are the two agencies that are looking at providing this service?
The names of the agencies?
Yeah.
One is St. Joseph's Rehabilitation Center. They have a small clinic right now in Messina next to the hospital, but they run a rehab down in Saranac Lake. They have an outpatient clinic in Saranac Lake. They also have an outpatient clinic in Malone. And they're also down towards the Hudson Valleys running programs there as well. The other possible entity, they haven't as shown as much interest. And initially when I had said something to them, they were not interested, but they have possibly put some more thought into it and may be interested, and that would be Citizen Advocates. But of the two, St. Joe's is definitely more interested at this time.
Now, St. Joseph's has a long track record of working in the addiction field. and it's a pretty good track record, isn't it?
They run good programs. Yes, they have. They've been around for quite a long time. I think like a lot of for profits. They're very mindful of their revenues and their margin in order to stay.
I thought they were a not-for-profit.
Yes, not for profit. Yes, yeah. I'm sorry. So yeah, they rely on state aid for to provide deficit funding for the programs that they're running. But the programs that they run do have a pretty good reputation in terms of the clinical services. Yes.
I think if we've got an agency that has an extensive track record in serving individuals with addiction and has both inpatient and outpatient services, it would seem to me that it would sort of be a seamless transition. Don't have an inpatient program. I think we should be interested in working with an agency that has extensive experience in providing services of this sort, and which many of our individuals with addiction, severe addictions, go to St. Joseph's for that initial period to get off those street drugs, and having St. Joseph's continue working with them beyond that point would provide better outcomes on a long-term basis. That's just my own editorial comment.
Thank you.
Mr. Burke.
I believe, and Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, Oasis had encouraged you, the county clinic, to open up a methadone treatment center. And before you answer that, I think at the very least, maybe rather than us speculating, Kevin said we have two questions to answer. One, do we want it? And if we do, who should do it? And I'm wondering, if we agree that we want it, maybe we should allow the experts, Oasis and Shana, to weigh in as to who would be the best to provide those services. Jim, St. Joe's has been in the county now in our county for about 3 years, if that. St. Lawrence County has been providing substance abuse treatment for many years. So, and again, not that the length of time necessarily gives a lot of weight to who could better do it, but I'd certainly like to hear from people who are experts in the field as to what their opinion is on who could best provide the services. And again, Jay, if you would answer the question, did Oasis encourage you to have a clinic?
Yes, they did. Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. Yes.
Larry.
Larry.
Yes. At the pre-committee last week, this came up, and I think I agree with Kevin, there's two questions. Well, I think one of them is not a question, that do we need it? I don't think there's any question there, that we do need it. I think the question is who. But you know, one of my concerns, as I spoke last Wednesday, is that we've been dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic for the last month or so, but we've already been dealing with a prior to that, and concurrently, we're dealing with the opioid addiction epidemic. So I think whether we do this or whether we don't, I don't think there's a question. I think we need to do it. I think it does come down to how do we do it, and so that we can, we've got a lot of balls in the air, and I feel that we're concentrating too much on one thing and potentially forgetting about something else.
Mr. Reagan. Go ahead, Mr. Reagan.
Mr. Chair, I think that, we should, as part of our consideration, invite St. Joe's to make a presentation at some point in the future once things calm down, so that we can, look at these and see what's in the long-term best interests of helping the addicted individuals in the county, and getting a more comprehensive treatment approach, so that they have a better chance of working through their addiction. So,
Mr. Akers.
So I can ask Jay and Sheena, is this grant, this $900,000 grant, is this time sensitive? Is there a deadline? Does the time run out here?
The application's due May 21st.
Okay. So we do not have very much time. So, and I think
the other 250,000.
Dr. Williams said that this is going to continue on, whether it's herd immunity or not. And I think we need to continue to conduct business. And then, Tina, do you have anything you'd like to add, Ms. Smith?
The other 250,000 we have to spend by September 30th as well. And so the other thing that we didn't mention was that it's not, if things continue to go the way they're going, it is not likely that SOAR monies will be coming for a SOAR 3. So it's not likely that we'll have another opportunity to get the upfront expenses paid for. So, I mean, this past month, we have seen some really intense situations where clients are very much struggling because it's come to the forefront, the other things that they did to manage their cravings and such aren't available now. And so it's really every day, I'm telling, Jay, more and more crisis situations where the clients have taken all their medicine, the 7-day supply in 2 days. And so we're really seeing, it's more, the COVID has made it more like dire and more concerning. But it is a truncated timetable.
So if we were successful, then if the board did want to have the county run it, how much of that $900,000 would it take to set this up? I mean, it has to be a secure location, all kinds of safety protocols. What type of infrastructure, physical costs are we actually talking about? And then staff, would it pretty much chew up the 900,000? And then we would basically be neutral and operate the clinic and hopefully be in the black like Credo and St. Joe's?
I mean, honestly, go ahead, Jay.
Well, I mean, certainly I don't think it would, take the entirety of the $900,000. 30% of that $900,000 can be used for, recovery housing and transitional housing for people, as well as for peer supports in the community. So, if county decides to move forward with this project, a lot of the staff that we have right now, particularly in chemical dependency staff, you know, could be transitioned and shared at the for the opioid treatment program. We wouldn't have to hire initially a lot of additional staff, with the exception of possibly a nurse and or a prescriber. And the prescriber would be part-time. So as you know, we have the locum tenens working here 2 days a week, 6.5 hours each day. She has a cap on her license or her waiver of 100. She's right at 84 right now. So with the opioid treatment program, there is no cap for the prescribers in terms of how many Suboxone patients they can serve. So that's one advantage. And also moving forward, you know, we had difficulty hiring prescribers for the chemical dependency clinics for 2 reasons. One, it's only the doctors that have 275 cap or allowance on their waiver, and they're very expensive. So, and then also it's hard to try to find somebody that wants to work only part-time, unless they have if they can piecemeal something together with other agencies. But typically, you know, people want a full-time position. So if we went with the OTP, we could probably advertise for a full-time position, not only for the oversight and prescription of the Suboxone and methadone in the OTP, but then also spend time, you know, in the clinics doing, you know, the MAT work that we're currently involved in. So, you know, the 250,000, you know, would buy us the dispensing equipment, it would buy us the security upgrade or the security system, the safe, a 30-day supply of meds, because you have to have a 30-day supply up front. Methadone is actually quite inexpensive. 30-day supply is $3,000. We would also have to buy some dispensing software. We need bulletproof glass, dispensing room. And we'd also have some monies for medical supplies and even for some office furnishings for that. So, you know, it's hard to know, you know, how much the county cost would be on top of that. If we, you know, went with this project and again, used as much of the existing staff that we already have. I mean, certainly there'd be a phase in, you know, where, you know, you'd have to build your caseload, and that's always expensive. But I do know that Citizen Advocates, the Tribe, St. Joe's, and St. Lawrence Health Systems are all saying that they would have individuals that they could refer for this high level of care.
Thank you. I think
Is
Mr.
that
Lightfoot
all?
has a question.
Go ahead. Mr. Lightfoot, yes.
I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about this, and I'd like to know whether or not OASIS has guidelines issued and directives dictating the type of staffing makeup that would be required in this. And I also got to say that you're looking at something that we have no idea, admittedly. You tell us you have no idea what the county cost would be. We have a month to look at this. At the very most, a couple of weeks would probably be the preferred amount of time to take a look at this and come up with a decision as to whether or not we think the county that barely scratches by with chemical dependency clinics and mental health clinics to take on another type of service provided to the very needy in our county, that we really have no idea what exactly the nuts and bolts of the program would be. I think also we need to know what's the staffing levels that St. Joe's you know, provides and dictates that the people in St. Lawrence and Franklin County are being serviced by, and how many people are they actually servicing with those numbers. I think that there's a lot of information that if you want this board to seriously consider starting another county clinic, that we need answers to those. I would need answers to those. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think that particularly given the effect that the COVID-19 is having on the county, the unknowns with revenues, the costs, the reimbursements. There are so many questions that need to be answered, Jay. I don't think you're going to get an answer tonight. Certainly not from me, and I don't think from the rest of the board either. But I would think that the essence is in get it done, get the information, get it to us, and let us chew on it and make a decision with input from whoever it is that we need to get input from, be it your staff, be it St. Joe's, be it anybody else. But I think that the fact remains that there's a lot left to be talked about before this ever comes to fruition or even to a vote. So thank you though for your time.
Well, may I respond?
I would defer to Mr. Ulrich at this time, Mr. Sheridan.
Yes, go ahead.
In terms of the county cost, if we were to take this on, there's so many variables that we don't know. Where is the clinic going to be? What's the site? What would be the cost of getting that site, up to code that's required for such an operation. The safe has to have, be in a special room, double walled and things like that. It has to be bulletproof glass, has to be security. So, not necessarily saying, we're going to open the opioid treatment program at this site, in this building, and know, what it's going to take to do, the renovations would be difficult, to predict at this point.
May I respond?
Mr. Lightfoot? Go ahead,
May I
Mr. Lightfoot.
respond? I guess that's my whole point, Jay, is that there are so many unknowns from, as you state, from where would this be sited? What would have to be done in order to bring whatever site was chosen up to the standards, I would assume, dictated by the state of New York. And now we have a month to do that in. And we've got another deadline in order to apparently qualify for another $250,000 sometime in September. I think it's unreasonable of the state to say that May 21st is a drop dead date, that either you come back and give us, your, yeah, we're going to do this, or, forget about it. Is there any possibility of getting them to extend that May 21st date so that the information that we would require would be available?
Well, the May 21st date is the deadline for the $900,000 grant through the U.S. Department of Justice. SOAR monies, need to be exhausted by the end of September. In terms of, a site, or let's start with the municipality. What makes most sense would probably be either Ogdensburg or Messina. There are people in Gouverneur that do travel to Credo. They may continue to do that. We also have people that are actually traveling to Syracuse, but I think those folks are, fairly well along in their recovery. So they're not getting daily doses, obviously. They're probably getting weekly doses or something similar to that, makes the travel feasible for them. But, you know, Ogdensburg and Messina, you know, typically, you know, have, you know, higher use cases of opioid and substance abuse than some of the other municipalities in the county. The advantage of being in Messina would be to be able to draw clientele out of Franklin County and also from the tribe that would need that service. It'd be a little further for them to travel, quite a bit further for them to travel, especially if they're coming from Malone, to have to pass through Messina and go to Ogdensburg in order, you know, to get daily dosing. That would be difficult.
Wouldn't citizen, if I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Lightfoot.
Citizen Advocates already has a presence in the northern part of the county. Is there no interest on their part to provide this service in that northern part of the county?
Well, I mean, their interest is not as great as St. Joe's. I think, you know, that, you know, I haven't gotten the green light from Oasis to be able to use SOAR monies for an opioid treatment program that's going to be initiated by a private nonprofit. They did, you know, they gave county clinics the okay to use that money, even though that's not what it was initially intended for. So, so some of that would depend on Oasis's decision. If there was a provider identified that was not county, you know, would they allow them to use these SOAR monies, much as, you know, they allow the county for money for this purpose? That I don't know, but I think we first probably have to identify the provider before they would answer the question if the county is not interested in moving forward.
If I may, one last time, Mr. Sheridan.
Go ahead, Mr. Lightfoot.
Would it cause any concern on your part if the board requested St. Joe's and the other organization or organizations to, you know, come in, provide us with what information they're able to, so that we've got something to something from an organization that is already involved in providing that kind of service, and you know, so we get a look at it from a different angle, so to speak.
I would think St. Joe's would be willing. I can't speak for Citizen Advocates because they haven't, you know, as strongly, you know, advocated, you know, to be identified as the provider agency for this program.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing it to us. And I don't disagree that there is a great need in this county for the service. My concern is just like yours, who's going to provide it? To what levels are we responsible to staff? You know, what are the staff requirements that we would be subjected to by Oasis? And listen, bottom line is cost is a bottom line, particularly in light of what Mr. Akers alluded to at a back and forth that he had earlier with someone, that we're looking at a 15% cut. The money's got to come from somewhere. And when 40% of the people in St. Lawrence County aren't working, aren't buying cars, aren't eating in restaurants, aren't making purchases other than needs, we could have a problem. So I think that we are duty bound to address that. We're duty bound to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money. And by God, as long as I'm there, I will be, and I'm sure the rest of this board will be too. So thank you again.
Mr. Akers?
I don't know, Sheena, did you have a question or you wanted to make a statement? You had I thought your fingers were up in the air. You wanted to say something.
No, I didn't have no.
Okay. Well, I think Legislator Reagan's suggestion about bringing in St. Joe's, they have a proven track record, that if Jay could extend an invitation, if possible, we could have him there at our finance meeting. And then I'm sure we all would have questions. Many of us don't know anything about methadone. I was convinced from Dr. Updike's presentation that methadone would be the way to go over Suboxone. So I would, if it was up to the rest of the board, if they were in agreement, if we would extend an invitation to St. Joe's, and if Citizens Advocates wants to come, but it seems like St. Joe's has the expertise and are interested, that maybe they would be here for the finance.
Mr. Burke?
Just a question for Jay. Does St. Joe's or Citizens Advocates have any experience running a methadone clinic?
Not to my knowledge, no. Definitely not Citizen Advocates, and that, no, they don't.
No. Thank you.
And I will say, if the county, is not going, to want to embark, in setting this program up, in terms of having St. Joe's come to the Board of Legislators for a presentation, that's more the function of the Community Services Board, because at that point it would be their decision as to whether or not they would, write a letter of recommendation to the state, allowing them to have, implement that program. So I'm not saying they couldn't come to the Board of Legislators, but it would really be a Community Service Board decision as well.
Mr. Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jay, we talked about the SOAR money. How important is that? You did allude to the fact that St. Joe's or private industry couldn't use it, but the county could. But I thought I heard Ms. Smith say earlier that the SOAR money is drying up. So I'm just wondering on the importance of the money.
Well, I mean, there was year one and year two. The first year we got 150,000, and in year two we got 250,000, a total of 400,000. Now that SOAR money was not designated specifically for county clinics. That was, that goes through the LGU in terms of how those funds are going to be used. We use approximately $150,000 for the county clinics to get geared up for telepsychiatry and telemedicine and teleservices, as well as we brought on some peers and to help, to help offset the cost, because peers were a little bit of an unknown as well. And they were mandating, OASIS is now mandating that you have peers. So it kind of, gave us a trial run of peers. But, I think, the Community Services Board and the LGU, we could justify, giving the $150,000 to county clinics, because we are the largest provider of chemical dependency services in the county. If we don't choose to allow, have county move forward and do an opioid treatment program, it may be hard to justify, keeping, some of those monies would be then distributed to other providers within the county. I couldn't justify having the county take the entirety of the $400,000 in SOAR money for its own use and purpose. Especially now in light of COVID, some of the other organizations, are not as equipped as we are to provide the teleconference services.
And what's the likelihood of this SOAR money continuing to come each year?
Well, I haven't heard that it is going to be coming anymore. There's been no talk of that. I mean, these were, federal dollars that, came through the state, OASIS. So, I mean, I don't know, but there's been no mention of a SOAR year 3.
Thank you.
Jim Reagan.
Could we, if we invite St. Joe's to the finance meeting, could we invite the Community Services Board to that meeting as well, so that everyone is operating on the same set of information?
You got my okay. It sounds like it makes a lot of sense. I would recommend that. And do we have, is the general consensus here that we do want to do that among the members that are here at this meeting? Do we want to do that for this finance meeting? Anyone opposed to the idea? Then let's do it. Right. Finance meeting and community service together.
And do they meet, Jay, does the Community Services Board meet tomorrow?
They do, yes.
So you could discuss that with them as well?
I can, yes.
Okay, that would be great. And then you and I can speak after that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Now we can do May.
Now can I do that
You
opposite
sure
agent?
can.
I'm trying. See, I tried to skip
Where's
Jay
Andrea?
for a reason. It's now 8:30.
That would have been nice.
Okay, we have Andrea is going to make the case for a resolution proclaiming May as Older Americans Month with the 2020 theme being Make Your Mark. And do we have a motion?
Behind you.
Oh, yes, we're gonna, Larry Denise is making the motion and Ms. Terminelli is seconding it and Ms. Kern is seconding it.
Okay.
That's it. And now,
So
go
this-
ahead, Andrea.
Okay, so this is proclaiming May as Older Americans Month. The 2020 theme is Make Your Mark, which encourages older adults to make their marks in their communities, to give back and contribute, which we all know that they do so well. One of the things I wanted to add, not in the resolution, but as a discussion point, is that obviously due to the current COVID pandemic, the normal May festival that would have been scheduled, as well as Older New Yorkers Day in Albany, will be postponed until, we're through this hump.
Okay. Any further discussion on this?
Andrea, can I ask Andrea a question as well?
Oh, Andrea?
Yes.
Are they still accepting nominations and things on the same schedule, or will that be postponed as well?
We have already selected our two winners. So the winners have been selected and been notified. They had actually already received their invitations to go to Albany. So it'll just be, like I said, postponed hopefully to the fall, is what we're hoping at this point, that it'll be safe to do so.
Great.
Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Denisha.
It's not regarding the resolution, but Andrea, what's the, how much has what's the number of home delivered meals? How much has it increased since the pandemic?
Sure. Thank you. Actually, I did have an update for all of you on that. So currently, we in March served 2,700 more meals than we did in March of last year. So we have added about 125 additional clients onto our home delivered meal routes, and that number is growing. Every single day, we have more and more people that are calling and requesting meals. And certainly as the restrictions and the orders to stay home last longer, I believe that we will continue to see our numbers rise over the next month to 2 months, depending on how long this lasts until we can fully reopen things in a safe manner. Just to give you a quick update, all home delivered meal clients currently, so this is about 650 people, they currently have, in addition to the hot meals they're getting Monday through Friday, they have 14 days of frozen food in their freezers. And we've gotten out about 215 shelf-stable food boxes to our highest risk clients. And that's thanks to Volunteer Transportation Center. They have been doing this all free of charge for us and delivering to our folks. And in those shelf-stable food boxes is 2 weeks worth of food. Our goal is to get the shelf-stable food boxes to all 650 clients. But like I said, we're about a quarter of the way there right now. We're waiting for supplies to come in. We're seeing some shortages through Renzi and Cisco, who are major food suppliers. They're hoping in the next few weeks to get stock. So That's one of the things that we're doing, and to be prepared in the event when we will have a exposure in a site. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but I think, given the numbers that we're hearing, we need to be prepared for that. So we will be able to still serve our clients, make sure that they have food, and we would take care of the wellness check, because in addition to the daily home delivered meal, all clients, receive a wellness check, which is really vitally important. So with that, the office staff could take care of that if we did need to temporarily close a nutrition site due to an exposure. If I could just add one more thing, we also have started a telephone reassurance program. Really worried and concerned about isolation and depression amongst our clients. This is coming off, a winter when most people have been primarily home. Asking folks to remain at home even longer is certainly very difficult. Isolation and depression are two of the top things that are always reported by our clients that they suffer from. So we have a telephone reassurance program that is free of charge, and it's available to any older adult that needs it. It's where we have a group of volunteers and staff members who will be calling once or twice a week just for a friendly visit, just to check in on the client and to see if they need anything.
Any more questions, Andrea?
Nope, I think that's it for me.
Oh, yes, Nicole. Go ahead, Nicole.
Thank you. Andrea, I just want to thank you and your team, your staff, for supporting your clients. You're doing a tremendous job. I just had one question. Early on in this, you had put out a need for volunteers to help assist with the home delivered meals. How is that going? Do you have enough volunteers, or is there still that need out there?
Sure. The volunteer response was amazing. We had about 125, 130 calls. Alexa Backus, our new Youth Bureau director, was an enormous help to us in organizing the volunteer effort. What we quickly found out is that a lot of people weren't able to volunteer because they had had exposures or they had traveled and whatnot. So we did get enough help. And what we're utilizing is some of those folks who couldn't help with meals, we're having them help with a telephone reassurance program, because that can be done safely without any risk of exposure for folks. We've also had 19 other county workers who weren't able to work within their own departments due to maybe lack of capacity for work from home, helping out in our nutrition sites as well. So we've had a lot of good team support, and thank you for your kind words. The nutrition staff and the office staff, they're doing amazing, and I'm tremendously proud of all of them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Tony had his hand up.
What's that?
Tony had his hand up.
Tony?
Thank you,
I think
Mr.
you
Chairman.
put your hand up?
Yes, I
Go
did.
ahead.
I think Nicole took half of my question away. I was just going to simply, again, thank Andrea and staff for what they're doing, but secondly ask, where were the hot spots of need for volunteerism across the county?
Sure. Our biggest sites in terms of production are Potsdam, Morristown, Gouverneur, and Canton. So those are the areas in which we really were needing volunteers. And those will continue to be our largest volume. Potsdam itself has 6 home delivered meal routes that go out of that site every single day.
Oh, thanks again. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could have Andrea speak to the times. Andrea, can you speak to the times volunteers are needed? The
Sure,
time of day?
volunteers. Yep. So if they're helping in the kitchen, really anytime between like 7 o'clock to 1 o'clock or tend to be the typical shifts that our staff work. If they're going to help deliver meals, 10 to about 12:30 would be the time frame in which we would need folks. And all of our volunteers, if I could quickly add, anybody who is coming in contact with the public, of course, all of our volunteers have been for weeks wearing masks as well as sanitizing between each client. We've been keeping a 6-foot distance for weeks between ourselves and clients, and are trying to have contactless delivery as much as is feasible. It's a little more difficult in some of our apartment complexes, but if we can knock on the door, make sure that the client is okay, and then leave the meal hanging in a bag on the door, that's what we're doing in order to better protect our clients.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Move on to vacancy review,
Yes.
social services.
Yep, Heather is with us.
Heather,
Yes.
how are you? Go ahead,
Good.
Heather.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Sheridan. The first vacancy request for the board's consideration is a social services attorney. This vacancy will be created by the resignation of one of our attorneys effective May 4th. The person in this position has been employed by the department for almost 2 years. Compounding the staffing issues that we are currently experiencing in our legal office is a vacant senior attorney position. The legal department is currently responsible for over 300 active cases, and when caseloads are too high, attorneys go to court unprepared, and their ability to effectively protect St. Lawrence County's most vulnerable children is threatened. This position is reimbursed at approximately 81%, and having adequate attorneys in the legal office reduces the amount of time that children are in foster care and reduces our county cost. Should I move forward with the next two positions?
Any questions on that position? Go ahead. Go ahead, Heather.
Oh, thank you. So the second vacancy request is for a caseworker position, and this vacancy is in the Children's Services Adolescent Unit due to a promotion and is one of 5 caseworkers in that unit. Many of the children served by adolescent caseworkers are children at risk of becoming persons in need of supervision, and there is currently no reimbursement for placement costs for these children. Our staff work diligently to provide preventive services and make referrals for more intensive preventive services as early as possible to avoid foster care or institutional placement. This position is reimbursed at approximately 72%, and the average caseload size in the adolescent unit currently is 13, with the highest caseload at 15.
Any questions? Okay, no questions. Go ahead then. Thank you. And we'll go to senior account clerk.
Yes, thank you. This vacancy has also been created due to a promotion. The majority of the work in this position is focused on foster care reimbursement, and the increase in the number of youth in care has impacted the volume of work for this position. Much of this foster care work is time sensitive and must be completed weekly to ensure that foster parents receive timely reimbursement. And this position is reimbursed at approximately 81%.
Any discussion? Questions? Mr. Akers?
Heather, these promotions were promotions into vacant spots?
Yes, they were within the department.
They were not new positions then?
One was a new position. The caseworker position was the newly created senior caseworker position that the board approved a few months ago.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. I think that's it, isn't it, for you, Heather?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Youth Bureau. Joanne?
No, Alexa.
Alexa, excuse me. Alexa.
There she is.
Sorry about
Sorry,
that, Alexa.
Kim. That's okay. I put forth a request for 2 temporary Youth Conservation Corps crew supervisors. The 2 individuals will be filling a position between June 16th to August 14th. These employees in this position will supervise the daily work of a crew of 7 to 14 Corps members in labor-intensive YCC projects. So this is something that we have typically been doing summer over summer. And I put this forth a few weeks back, kind of, moving forward business as usual. Although with COVID-19, I do realize that, it may be interesting to see if we can move forward with this. This morning, I participated in a phone call with the Association of New York State Youth Bureaus, and I will be sitting in on another conversation tomorrow morning as far as what summer programs are looking like across the state. Some decisions have already been made that summer programs are getting canceled, FYI.
I would just also offer that we at Vacancy Review Committee, we talked with Alexa about the unknown nature, as she just mentioned. And I think we still felt strongly that having it in place, if things were to let up and she was able to find even appropriate projects, that it would be nice to have these in place, but have, follow the discussion before they're actually filled.
Correct.
Questions?
Okay,
Thank you, Alexa.
thank you.
Thank you.
She covered both of them, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Next thing, county administrator's report. Do you have anything you want to let us know? Go ahead.
All right. So I think I'd start by saying that Legislator Denisha made a very good point about things continuing during this. And as certainly as you've heard tonight, and as your expectations would be, county government continues to run in the background in some respects. But it's also important, for example, with planning, with the CDBG grant coming up. Those typically are discussed briefly and we move through because we all agree it's a great thing. But I really wanted Jason to educate you in an opportunity like that about the great work that goes on, again, in the background. But it generates quite a bit of revenue coming in. It helps out many, if not all, of the towns in the county. And it's also something important, I think, as Legislator Reagan mentioned, to recognize. But in that vein, I wanted to mention to you in one of our single highest days, as you know, hearing from Dr. Williams and Dana, we're beginning week 6 of active COVID-19 response. And on April 12th, the governor required masks or face coverings to be provided for office staff. Our problem was at that time we didn't have any. Certainly everything that comes into the EOC, we send right along to all of the agencies that have requests in, not thinking at the time necessarily that we would be in line next. We've been providing, as Matt indicated tonight with the percentages, all of the necessary entities, but by Wednesday and some generous donations, we were able to deliver masks at the appropriate proportion for office density to all departments so that they could begin wearing masks. We are now hoping to also replace those masks with cloth masks as time allows and as inventory increases. Our cases of county employees who are dealing with COVID-19 confirmed cases remains at 2. As I mentioned in the last committee meeting, highway opened back up today, but we have been very careful about how we've responded to that, and I'm hopeful we won't see any more cases. Also wanted to mention to you with the extension of New York Pause now until May 15th, I wanted to ask the board about their objection to continuing or plan to continue holding the 2 meetings, if not all of the meetings in May via Zoom. That would allow us to go ahead and make that advertisement separate from our standard procedure. If there's no concern with that, we will move forward unless there's questions about that when I'm finished with the report. Also wanted to mention to you that at Finance, we'll be doing a resolution in an effort to capture the generous donations of PPE and masks of all kinds, as well as a $300 donation from Edward Knight from Colton, and modify the budget to provide that to the Emergency Operations Center. Are there any questions before I move on? We continue with the work group to meet daily. We're now meeting 7 days a week with the group that Chairman Lightfoot appointed. We've had great participation, as well as we continue to participate in the calls every afternoon with New York State. Are there any questions right now on COVID-19 before I move on? Okay, I wanted just to give you an update from the real property perspective quickly. The town tax rolls are underway. Those deadlines are going to be coming up, and the state has made some adjustments just this last Friday, which is challenging the staff and the assessors to get that information pulled together and applied correctly. You may also note in our discussion about the buses running in tandem, you also may see or hear that there are 2 county cars moving about in tandem as well. And that would be the real property staff working through the foreclosure actions and taking the pictures and getting necessary information. It's for the same reason. So in order that we socially distance, but also keep company with those doing the work associated with the foreclosures, we have 2 people out in the field. And we can't accomplish social distancing in a Ford Fusion very easily. So if you hear about that, that's the reason. Next, I wanted to mention to you that Mr. Zimmerman started back in a part-time capacity with us last Monday. He's prepared some preliminary reports relative to flooding, and I'll share those with you after this meeting. He will be working both tracking and following up with the distribution and request for sandbags and appropriate level of response as the water increases. I'll share the information with you, and certainly any questions that come up, we're happy to answer them. I did want to provide you with an update that last week, I believe on Thursday, I was elected the president of the St. Lawrence Health Initiative. So we have a changeover in board membership, and until the annual meeting, I'll be serving as president. So I look forward to working with them. They also are taking up an initiative called SLC, or hashtag SLC Stays Home. So we're going to be looking to push that out and to get some momentum behind getting folks to stay home. We'd also like to invite some other organizations to join us in that endeavor. And finally, unless there's questions, to the real property. There will be a bar assessment review training conducted by Director Bruce Green. That is scheduled for May 14th and May 15th, and he'll be conducting that via Zoom as well. Are there any questions? And lastly, I wanted to mention 2 things. I wanted to indicate also to you that Legislator Denisha has been a part of the meal delivery program. Andrea had meant to include him in her comments, but he's certainly been out on the road delivering as well. And also, when we go into executive session, if you'd be patient with us, Dylan would like to try a couple of things. We're getting used to the screen sharing with information, and he just wants to try a couple of things before we begin executive, if no one objects.
No objections? We'll move on to committee reports. Somebody saying something? No? Let's move on to committee reports. Board of Health, Mr. Akers.
We'll be meeting tomorrow, and I'm certain that the total topic will be on the COVID-19. So we have a meeting from 6 to 8 tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Mr. Lightfoot, CDP Board of Directors.
Yes, they held their meeting earlier in the month. I was unable to hook up with them electronically, so I was unable to be in attendance at that meeting. But I will get the minutes from it and report them to you the next time around.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kevin Akers, Community Services Board.
We'll be meeting also tomorrow from 4 to 6, and I'm certain to be discussing the possibility of the methadone clinic and extending the invitation. I'm sure that Jay will talk about it. It was during the Community Services Board meeting last month that we discovered through just a random conversation and some questions that these students had returned to SUNY Potsdam and other colleges without notifying public health in any capacity whatsoever. Fortunately, I think there's 8 cases at the SUNY Potsdam students. I don't know if there's any more or not. That it seems to have held off for now, but it was very distressing to find out that these students were here without any notification of our public health.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Mr. Denisha, Office of Aging Advisory Board.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Youth Advisory Board, Ms. Terminelli.
We have not had a meeting, but I expect that Ms. Backus will be scheduling them soon.
Oh, thank you. Old and new business, any old business? Go ahead, Tony. You gotta push your button.
Thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge and thank Legislator Nance Arquette for the securement of 2,000 face masks for our employees and another 500 N95 masks. Thank you, and we really appreciate that. Work well done.
Any more new old business? Any more new business? None being mentioned, we'll go to executive session. Or is there a need to go into executive session?
There is. Can I ask 2 questions?
Yes, go ahead.
Is there any objection to conducting meetings via Zoom in May? We will plan on doing that.
No objections on my end.
And secondly, is there any objection to the Community Services Department continuing to work on the federal application such that it may not be necessarily the county, but it may come to the county? Is there any objection to that at this time so they can continue working?
You need to.
Okay, we'll proceed. Thank you.
Okay.
And we do have a need for executive session for negotiations, litigation, and appointments from the operations meeting.
Okay. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
So move.
So moved by Mr. Lightfoot, seconded by Mr. Terminelli. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're in executive.